Welcome in to Fantasy Football Night in America. If I can say that, I don't think it's trademarked. You are watching the first of 4 straight hours of nothing but fantasy football, nothing but NFL draft talk, and nothing but Dynasty fantasy football analysis. Welcome in to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Eric Balkman from the FFPC, from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown special guest host. He looks familiar because he always comes on. I'm the warm-up for his show. I'm the opening act for Dynasty Nerds each and every Thursday night here on the Better Sports Network. You'll see him at 9 again tonight. You'll see me at 9 because we're doing 4 hours. You follow him on Twitter at Dynasty Price. Welcome in, Garret Price.
Man, thanks so much for doing this. You reached out a few weeks ago talking about, hey, a week before the draft, maybe we do this like mega show. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? That's brilliant. Of course, we need all the NFL draft coverage. We need all of the fantasy football coverage. What better than to combine forces and make a mega show? So this is a treat for me. Hopefully it's a treat for everyone watching as well.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to bring in some guests coming up on tonight's show. We're going to get in from player profiler. Theo Gremminger is going to come in and break down the running backs coming up at the bottom of this hour. At the bottom of next hour, Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown is going to come on. We're going to break down the tight end class. Garret and I are also going to talk about the wide receivers. I know you have a lot of expertise and you have a lot of thoughts and feelings and emotions on this year's wide receiver class. We're going to get into that in the second hour. And to kick things off, we'll talk a little bit about the quarterbacks in this year's class, a great crop that we'll get into here shortly. Before we do that, I do want to remind everybody, you know, the FFPC and Dynasty Nerds have been partners, I think, going back since last year as well. And one of the great things that you have access to at Dynasty Nerds is all this great Dynasty analysis that you can put towards your pocketbook and try to win with the FFPC Dynasty Leagues. You can actually adopt Dynasty Orphans right now with the FFPC. Discounted teams are available from the $250 level all the way up to the $2,500 level. But some of them are discounted all the way down to $1, and we're throwing in some free swag when you pick up these teams as well, as we are we're officially less than 1 week until the start of the NFL draft. And so this is the time to go in and pick up those Dynasty Orphan teams. There's some Dynasty startups available at the $100 level there. That's at myffpc.com. And don't forget about the Fantasy Pros Championship, $350 entry fee in that. June 1st is the early bird deadline. Register by then, draft by June 15th. You'll get a free $35 team credit into your FFPC account, and you can win $1 million in the process. What's wrong with that? I tell you this, my friends, nothing is wrong with that. It's going to be a lot of fun this whole summer. But before we can get to the summer of drafting, Garret, we have to get to the NFL draft itself. So let's kick things off. We're going to talk quarterbacks on the show tonight. Now, at least to lead off, Bryce Young was the sort of de facto number 1 pick. We kind of all thought he was going to go number 1. And then the Vegas odds, our friends in the desert, shifted the odds on us after the Panthers traded for the number 1 pick. And there was a lot of heat that CJ Stroud was going to be the pick. Now we flip-flopped again, and we're back to Bryce Young. It looks like he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. He is a guy that has canceled all his other team visits going forward until the start of the NFL draft. He seems to believe that he's going to go number 1 in the Panthers, even though they have not come out and said as much. And of course, why would they? It doesn't help them at all to say that. I want to get to your thoughts from him from a Dynasty fantasy football standpoint, because this is a player that does it all on the field. He did it at a high level. He did it against great competition. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's shown us everything that we need to see from a collegiate aspect. One of the big things, and probably the biggest knock on him, is Bryce Young, or is his size, the size of Bryce Young.
Yep.
As we go forward, especially in our Dynasty Superflex drafts, as we go forward in those, if you have the number 1 overall pick, is Bryce Young's size enough to move you off of him, even though he has the talent, move you on to Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, or somebody like that? What do you think about Bryce Young's size and how it's going to affect him as a pro player?
Yeah, it's obviously the biggest thing that's been a conversation point all through his collegiate career. He overcame it that entire time. Then we had all the measurables at the combine. Actually weighed a little bit more than we were thinking at the combine, which was a plus, but still not a guy with prototypical size. You know, we're looking at some of these other quarterbacks, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. These guys all have that prototypical size build. When they walk off the bus, you look at the guy and you're like, yeah, that's the guy there. Bryce Young doesn't have that, but he does have the pedigree with being, a highly rated recruit coming out of high school. Then he went to Alabama, started pretty early on, performed very well there. So there's a lot to like with Bryce Young. I think what it comes down to for fantasy football purposes is, and really this whole class is really difficult to pin down who the top quarterback is. I think most people would agree that Bijan's the top player, but in super flex leagues, that's going to be tough. And I think Bijan will probably still go 1 overall most cases. But you got to get these quarterbacks early, or you're not going to be able to get them. So where I'm at with Bryce Young right now is not even as much with his size necessarily is, guys like Anthony Richardson, they offer that rushing floor that Bryce and even CJ to an extent don't really offer. Anthony Richardson has a great rushing floor. So that's, something that can get you a little excited, could potentially propel him ahead of some of these other guys, but there's a lot of risk from him as a passer. So you have to weigh all of these things. Bottom line for me is I'm not going to let the size dictate whether or not I'm going to take Bryce Young. It's really going to come down to, do I think he is the best passer of the football? Does he have enough in the rushing game? All of those things together, because we've seen a lot of other quarterbacks come in at a smaller size and have success. So if the guy's smart, if he's accurate, if he's mobile, he can still be an effective quarterback at the NFL level.
So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but if you have the number 1 pick, and assuming the Panthers do take Bryce Young here, are you going to be able to move off of him because obviously, you just said, we know, like, one of the things high stakes players always talk about year after year, we want pass catching running backs, we want target hounds, target volume guys at wide out, and then quarterbacks that can run. And I think, like, when you have the first overall pick in Superflex, you gotta make sure that you're getting the right guy here. And if Young doesn't offer that running upside that maybe somebody else would, Anthony Richardson, then maybe the time is to move off him. Is the lack of his running skills, or at least the question mark of his running skills, is that enough for you to move off him to take maybe an Anthony Richardson, even if he ends up in Seattle, where he's probably going to be sitting for this year, or Stroud if he goes to Houston, if he goes to Indianapolis or something like that?
It's tough because I if I'm being completely transparent, and normally you come on here and you're like, I'm listening to these analysts because they have the answers, right?
Right.
I'm torn. I'm very, very torn on this exact question, because for me, I like to play it safe, especially when I'm picking in the first half of the first round. I don't want to miss, because if I miss in the first half of the first round, that's setting my team back so far. Like that's a big hit. So Anthony Richardson, although on paper makes sense for fantasy football players, if he's out of the league in 2 years, then that doesn't do us any good if he's not a good enough passer. I think he can. I think he can develop into that passer. If you want to take that risk, I have no problem with it. For me right now, if I had to draft today, knowing only what I know now about them as prospects and roughly where I think they'll go, I think they're all going to be top 10 guys. If that's the case, I think CJ Stroud is the best passer of the football and the safest guy with the fewest red flags. So all of that being said, he would probably be the quarterback I would go with first, then Bryce Young, then Anthony Richardson. But the draft could completely shift all of that. So we're going to have to wait and see.
Dynasty rookie drafts for me, I know the deeper it gets into the draft, Garrett, I start swing. My swing gets longer, right? Like 100%. I'm shooting for the home runs, right? But what about the top half of these drafts? Because we are facing, and we'll get to Anthony Richardson here. We are facing a player, athletically, his upside is something we haven't seen at the NFL Combine at his position before. Broke numerous records there. On the field, we have not seen him put it together for a full game against a really tough opponent. So there's some tape concerns there. However, there are going to be some people that argue that because of the upside of Richardson and what he's able to offer, he should be the guy that you are going for broke on at the 101, or maybe even at the 102 if he slips there, because this is how you win dynasty leagues, not only for 1 year or 2 years. You think about Anthony Richardson, his career, it could only be 2 years, but it could be 12. It could be 15 for all we know. And at that point, then you can make the argument, well, instead of swinging for home runs in the second round, maybe I should be swinging for home runs at the start of the draft.
Yeah, and I wouldn't blame, I legitimately would not blame anyone for doing that, because he has everything you look for in a quarterback for fantasy football purposes. There might be more questions about him for real life football, but for fantasy football, look, you could throw for only 100 yards. If you rush for 100 yards too, I'm cool with it. We're good. So that's the type of ceiling he has. And watching his tape, I think we assume that guys that are crazy athletic and crazy good runners are always run first quarterbacks. I don't think that was the case with Anthony Richardson. Watching his tape, he was truly looking to get the ball downfield more often than not, but it wasn't an amazing offensive line. They didn't have the best playmakers at receiver. So there just always wasn't plays in the passing game for him to make. And then he does the best he can with his legs. So even though, yes, there's a risk there. If somebody said that they wanted to take him number 1 overall, even ahead of Bijan Robinson, I would have no problem with it, because he is the type of player that could ascend into the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes type of tier at fantasy football quarterback.
We're talking about dynasty fantasy football. Certainly Bijan Robinson could carry you to a couple of championships, but at the same time, if Anthony Richardson is the player that a lot of people think he could be, he could carry you to multiple dynasty championships over the course of a decade. And I think that's what we look at from Richardson here. Getting back to his supporting cast at Florida, when you watch this tape, do you think that we are undervaluing that? In other words, Richardson actually could have been better had he had a better offensive line, had he had better guys on the perimeter, better weapons to throw to. Are we kind of underrating that a little bit? Because I don't hear it talked about a whole lot. But if that was the case, if he has a supporting cast like Bryce Young had, maybe this would be a slam dunk 101 for Anthony Richardson here rather than Young.
Yeah, when you look at, you're comparing apples and oranges when you look at what CJ Stroud had and Bryce Young had at their disposal, and then what Will Levis had and what Anthony Anthony Richardson had. So it's very different from that perspective on what we're looking at. In Florida, honestly, you're looking at a lot of skill position players over the years. It was very puzzling how the players were used and how some of the players were developed. You can just go to as recent as last year with Dameon Pierce, a guy that ended up being a 4th round pick. He looked like a potential rookie of the year candidate early. I know he fell off a little bit, but then you look at his usage in college, and it was 6 carries in this game and 9 carries in that game. And why is he not getting better usage? He has the body, he has the build. Why is the usage not there? So, and look, these guys are trying to win college football games. We're caring about fantasy football. These are different things, but at the same time, Florida has had a history of some of these things where it's a little puzzling on some of how these guys were developed ever since Urban Meyer's been gone.
CJ Stroud, I love what he can do throwing the football. And I think he might have the highest floor of any of these 4 quarterbacks.
Agreed.
But, and there's always buts with these guys, one of the things that does concern me is he didn't look all that great under pressure. Once he gets out into the pocket, he didn't necessarily extend the plays, the majority of the plays that he had. Again, the times that Ohio State line let him down, which was rare. So that does concern me. When you have a quarterback that is going from college to pro, I think there's 3 things that are really important. Number 1 is how do you do under pressure? Number 2 is throwing with anticipation, which I think you have to do in the NFL. And number 3 is being able to extend the play. Now, I think Stroud does everything really great for a collegiate quarterback. My concern is how well he is going to do once he gets to that next level and he's facing these big, ferocious, speedy, super strong, super quick, super agile defenders that he didn't always face on a week-to-week basis at Ohio State. What's your concern level for that aspect of his game?
I think that's a great point you brought up, because especially some of his earlier tape, that was one of my biggest concerns with CJ Stroud. And I want to rewind 2 years real quickly when we were talking about Justin Fields, another Ohio State quarterback. One of the things that was said about him was, we would like to see him run the ball more. He's an excellent passer, but we would like to see him run the football more. Well, then he gets to the NFL and we see this dude's a ridiculous athlete. He's putting up Lamar Jackson numbers as a runner. Now, don't get me wrong. CJ Stroud is not the athlete that Justin Fields is. But we look at that playoff game against Georgia. That showed me a lot in that game because, one, that Georgia defense is the closest thing to an NFL defense that you're going to be able to see at the college level. So many pro prospects on that defensive line and linebacking core and secondary. Like, these guys were awesome. It's just a great, great defense that Georgia put out there. He was able to thread the needle, make big plays short. Like, he was all over the field, anticipating, making good reads, looking off defenders. Like, he was doing everything you want. But we also saw a little bit in the running game that we had never really seen before. Like, I thought CJ, as an Ohio State fan, I thought CJ Stroud was a statue. And now I'm seeing him out here breaking these gash plays, 15, 20 yards that I did not see his entire career. So that makes me wonder if this is more of a schematic thing for Ohio State, that they tend to try to have their quarterbacks stay in the pocket as long as possible until the play breaks down. And so I wonder if he's unleashed a little bit more at the NFL level. He's never going to be Anthony Richardson. He's never going to be one of these amazing rushing quarterbacks. But from a guy that originally would have gotten you 50 yards rushing and one quarterback sneak touchdown, now all of a sudden is he in the 400 yards rushing range, 450? Like, is he a little bit better of an athlete than we originally gave him credit for? And to go back to your comment about pressure, that was the best game that I had seen him handle pressure his entire career. Now, it's one game. It's a small sample size, so we can't bet the farm on that, but I like to see guys progress, especially in big games.
By the way, we shout out to everybody in the YouTube chat right now. T-Was is commenting about my Chosen hat. This is not it's the second person that asked me this thing. Is this a Chosen Anderson hat in the honoring his new signing with the Miami Dolphins? No, this is a King Baby Chosen hat that I picked up at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas a few years ago. I don't know why I chose it today, but I did it. It has nothing to do with Robbie Anderson, or Chosen Anderson, I should say. Not that I don't like Chosen Anderson. He's a fine player. Excited to see what he can do in Miami, although my expectations are very low. Now, moving on. Will Levis. He's the only one of the big four that we haven't talked about. This is a player, go back a month and a half or so, Garrett, and he was a guy that we kind of just thought he's going to be the third quarterback off the board. Maybe he goes fourth overall to Indianapolis, or maybe somebody comes up and trades with Arizona at 3, and then Levis is the pick there. Then I don't know what really happened, because I know Richardson, like, obviously leapfrogged him after the NFL Combine and everything. But at the same time, now we're talking about him not being a first-round pick, maybe being a day 2 pick. And I don't understand why he has fallen so far so fast when we haven't really gotten any really negative information on him. At least I haven't. Are we sort of unfairly painting him as a future bust right now? The fact that he has fallen so far down, a lot of the mock drafts out there and a lot of the pundits all of a sudden don't have as much good things to say about him.
You know, the NFL draft is hilarious with that, because sometimes it's exactly what you just said. People fall out of love with them and they fall down draft boards. But what I have to wonder is, is that the case where the NFL GMs actually fell out of love with him? Or was he just always low, and then we as fans and media and analysts caught up to what the NFL is actually thinking? Now, I wonder, though, we talked about supporting cast. You look at Will Levis in 2021, he was putting up fantastic numbers on the ground, in the air, leading a Kentucky team that is traditionally a doormat in the SEC to a very relevant season, and everything went great. Well, that offensive line went from one of the better offensive lines in college football to one of the worst offensive lines in college football. Some of his best playmakers went to the NFL. So there was a lot that happened for him in that year. And I think you almost have to kind of balance the two films. You have to balance the 2021 and the 2022, because the truth is probably somewhere in the middle there. And I'm with you. I think he might be getting a little unfairly painted. I still think he has a very strong arm. I still think he's a very underrated athlete. We talk about how good of an athlete Anthony Richardson is. Levis is a very good athlete in his own right as well. So, you wonder how much happened in the interviews and things like that we're just not privy to. But I'm with you. I think the hate has gone a little bit too far with Will Levis there.
Hendon Hooker is a player I talked about with one of my buddies today. A guy who's been getting some first round love. Now we're talking about maybe the Commanders or maybe the Titans or the Vikings is the team I've heard a ton about drafting Hendon Hooker. He's an interesting guy. I always, regardless of position, and maybe it's a little bit overblown at quarterback, but regardless of position, Garrett, I never really liked old players coming into the NFL. Hendon Hooker is 25 years old. He's coming off an ACL tear. Now he was SEC Offensive Player of the Year. He was first team All SEC. He cut up a ton of really, really good defenses. But then in the back of my mind, I'm kind of like, well, he was doing this at age 24 against 20 and 21-year-olds. Isn't there something to be said for that? And I think there is. Now, when we consider him from Dynasty fantasy football purposes, if this dude goes in the first round, even with the ACL tear, all of a sudden we have to sit up and pay attention because this is what the NFL is saying about this player. And now we have to look at it from our own selfish Dynasty fantasy football standpoint. Like, this should be a guy that we're looking at potentially being a super flex maven. 25 years old coming in the NFL. I don't know if an NFL team wants to do that, but I can get on board with it as a Dynasty fantasy football player because I know I could still get a lot of good years out of this guy if he's not a bust.
You're absolutely right. And especially at the quarterback position, if this is a 25-year-old running back, I have huge concerns, but as a 25-year-old quarterback, I mean, these guys are playing, and we don't know that he's going to, but we're seeing quarterbacks regularly play past 37, 38, 39, guys even into their 40s. So, even if we only get 10 years, that's still 10 years out of a quarterback that's an eternity. Most dynasty leagues aren't even 10 years old at this point. So, it's I'm not concerned about that. You go back to his tape and watching it, talk about a guy that really elevated himself originally at Virginia Tech and just kind of continually kept working on his craft, only threw 2 interceptions this past season. Crazy accurate, made a lot of really good decisions, very good athlete as well. So you have a little bit of that rushing floor as well there. So there's a lot to like. Yes, you do have the ACL, but I remember talking about this. This would have been probably about a month and a half or so ago when we were breaking down the quarterbacks on Dynasty Nerds. And one of my comments was, if he had not torn his ACL, would we be considering him above guys like Will Levis? And it's funny now where even with the ACL tear, he is now getting to the point where people are talking about him potentially going above a Will Levis. So it's really interesting to see how things have kind of come full circle on some of this. But when a guy can do it in the SEC, that's definitely interesting. And even if he does end up still being in round 2 or round 3, we've seen a lot of very good NFL quarterbacks in recent years be in the 2nd and 3rd round. So it's not a death sentence, but that goes from a top 5 or 6 super flex pick to a mid 2nd round super flex pick or something like that.
It's crazy. I don't know if I'm realizing this for the first time now. Out of the top 5 quarterbacks, 4 of them are SEC. You have Florida, Kentucky, Alabama, and Tennessee represented, and of course Ohio State with C.J. Stroud. Who knew that there was so much talent in the SEC? Blows my mind.
Who knew?
Who knew? So the other thing I will say about Hendon Hooker, and this goes into my next point here with Tanner McKee from Stanford. I don't cover, but I'm in Northeast Wisconsin. I have a sports talk show here. So obviously I talk a lot of Packers, Garrett. And I thought it was interesting that both Hendon Hooker and Tanner McKee were brought in, or at least visited with the Green Bay Packers, considering they want to turn the keys over to Jordan Love. I wouldn't be surprised if Hooker or McKee, if they're in the 2nd round, if Brian Gutekunst, especially if they get an extra 2nd round pick in this Aaron Rodgers trade, wouldn't be surprised if Brian Gutekunst reaches out and grabs one of these guys just in case the Love thing doesn't work out. And I know that sounds insane, but there's a non-zero chance of it happening. Let's talk about Tanner McKee here for a little bit. Should he be the 6th guy off the board after these 5 players? Sounds like he will be a day 2 pick, whether that's round 2 or round 3. I don't know. I don't stay up late and watch a ton of Pac-12 football, but I understand what McKee has been able to do out there and the accomplishments that he's had over the course of his career. I do like him, but I think, he's kind of like with this Hooker thing with the ACL. I think he's a step down from these other guys, and I would take him obviously in a super flex draft, but I don't think I'm ever going to be excited about this guy.
Yeah, I can understand your feelings on that. It's funny because I try to not make comps from one guy in the same school to the other, but sometimes it just happens. his game is not that far off from Davis Mills. He's a very similar type player. They both got the long necks going. They're neither one of them are fantastic athletes. You're more traditional pocket passer, the plus 6'3" type of guys, strong arm. But with the offense that Stanford runs, it's pretty vanilla. They're not putting up the numbers that these other quarterbacks are. So it's tough to sometimes gauge how well they're doing based on compared to some of these other players at the position. But he's definitely not somebody you're overly excited about in Dynasty fantasy football, because like I said, he is a statue. I mean, that guy's not getting you rushing yards at all. So you're in the Mac Jones, Davis Mills, like that type of range as far as an athlete. So I guess, I mean, if he gets the draft capital, I'm definitely going to make him the sixth quarterback off the board. But really, once you get past those top five, it's a real crapshoot. I mean, if you want to like a Stenson Bennett, or you want to like there's other guys, but I don't really have confidence that there's a strong sleeper quarterback in this draft.
All right. So why do we not like Max Duggan after what we saw in what he was able to do with TCU to get him to the college football playoff? Great. I mean, again, we don't necessarily care about stories and everything, but why is this guy not getting more love? I mean, it seems like there's a chance he might not even get drafted.
Yeah, I think he kind of falls into a range of a lot of quarterbacks that we've seen over the years of the, Stenson Bennett kind of falls into the same thing where they're winners, they work hard, they give their body up, but at the end of the day, they just don't have the physical attributes. Colt McCoy was kind of that same type of guy. People are wondering, was Baker Mayfield maybe overdrafted because of the heart and the desire and the story and and I think the NFL is just kind of like, look, we're going to base it on traits, and this guy just doesn't have it. When you watch him as a passer, yes, there are times where he'll make some very good throws, but there's a lot of very inaccurate throws. There's a lot of times where he would miss guys and not see the open receivers. And so there were just a lot of things on his tape that I wouldn't say were like red flags, like do not draft, but definitely looks more like the developmental type of quarterback as opposed to somebody that could come into the NFL right away and be a force.
I'm going to bring up one more guy that I liked, and I thought he'd be getting more love, and he's not. And I guess I'm a little bit out of a loss to find out why this guy is so far down most people's dynasty rankings. And it's the guy at UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. This is a guy that put up solid numbers rushing the football, which we love as dynasty fantasy football players. Solid completion percentage. I thought he put up some pretty good yardage numbers his last couple of years. He did throw a decent amount of interceptions, and I know that's normally a bugaboo. For whatever reason, I kind of look past the interceptions a little bit at the collegiate level because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But this guy is a guy that's like, sometimes out of people's top 10. I mean, they're finding 10 quarterbacks better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And I don't really see that. I like this player a lot. I think this is a guy that, again, in a super flex league, and you're talking about a 6-7 round dynasty draft, I'd be all over this guy when we get to the third round and fourth round, and people are going to let him sit out there. I think he's got an interesting, like Liam Neeson, he's got a special set of skills, or whatever. I can't remember what Neeson said now and taken, but it's something like that. He's got a special set of skills that I think the right coach can mold him into something special in the NFL.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points. I think when we look at him as a passer compared to some of the other guys, the Clayton Tunes and guys like that, I think they're a little more developed as passers. And you have that Chip Kelly offense out there in UCLA, and it's a little gimmicky and things like that. But he is an older, not in the sense, and that sounds negative. I don't want to say older as in bad, but we like quarterbacks that have had a lot of starts. He is a guy that's played a lot of college football, which is a good thing. These guys that are one-year wonders are a lot more scary often than guys that have started for 3 years, 4 years, things like that. So, we do like to see that out of him. He is a really good athlete. So I would be with you. I don't know about the third. I'm kind of iffy on the third, but the fourth round, I'll take almost any quarterback. If it's a super flex league, Like, I'll just take all the quarterbacks because you never know when there is a Brock Purdy. You never know when these guys are going to be there. So I think it's absolutely worth taking a chance on him, especially somebody with the rushing upside that he has, even if he's only a backup. Sometimes those backup guys can be awesome because the starter gets hurt. You have him for 4 weeks. You start him for 2, trade him then to somebody else, and your life is good, So I think he is a guy that I would be willing to target later as well.
He'd be the type of guy that if you have on your roster, because he's kind of a roster clogger, if you play in a deep dynasty league, he's kind of a roster clogger with, if he's going to be the backup on his own team, what are you really doing for him? Well, you wait till the guy goes down in front of him. And a lot of times we see these quarterbacks, these young quarterbacks that have rushing ability. I know because I was a sucky quarterback in high school. What did I do? After my second read, I'm tucking and running. And that's it. That's what some of these guys can do. DTR is one of them. And so if he's the type of guy that has to fill in, maybe he has a game where he ends up, having to come in the first quarter, second quarter, then you can flip him for maybe a future pick if you're not believing in him, or maybe he turns into something more. It's all why we play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Dorian Thompson-Robinson definitely on my radar for sure. What should be on your radar is the NFL Draft, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming up less than a week away, and Fantasy Alarm has all the fantasy football and betting content you need to prepare for the NFL Draft and the upcoming 2023 season. Featuring Britt Flynn's mock draft, rookie scouting reports, NFL team needs, player projections, Discord chat, and much more. For a limited time, get the complete NFL package plus DFS playbooks for all sports at an additional 20% off the already discounted annual price with promo code NFL Draft at fantasyalarm.com. That's promo code NFL Draft, as in National Football League, at fantasyalarm.com. We're just getting started here, ladies and gentlemen. We got a ton of stuff in on the quarterbacks. We're going to bring in a special guest. Theo Gremminger from Player Profiler is going to step in right now. We're going to talk running backs with him. It is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show Dynasty Nerds mega episode mashup tonight. We're having a lot of fun. We hope you are too. He's Garret Price. I'm Eric Balkman. This is the Better Sports Network.
Front Yard Fantasy, weekdays at 3 Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Our great friend, Britt Flinn with Fantasy Alarm, and as the host of the Lightning Round podcast and the Herstory pod with Women of Fantasy Football.
Dawson Knox, what happened to him this year?
Man, fell off.
Right? It's just gone. It's disappeared off the face of the map. You think Dawson Knox can put together a comeback campaign here?
Man, I don't know. I think that kind of some of the Gabe Davis hype and a little bit of that system change took away his targets. And I think that they're probably going to go out there and get a legit wide receiver too. So I'm not really expecting him to bounce back like he did 2 years ago.
I think he's fine. I think he lives in the glob of tight ends. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to get better, but he's probably not going to get worse. And if you need a guy to plug in your roster who's got a shot at a touchdown, you grab Dawson Knox in that Bills offense. And
that's a good point too. Like there's Travis Kelce and then there's basically everybody else. A glob of tight ends was such an accurate description.
Yeah.
He is firmly in that glob for me.
Firmly in the glob.
I was a little bit disappointed this year. He didn't take that step up, but now he has cemented himself as, I'm not trying to project a breakout for Dawson Knox. There's some safety in what he's going to provide, and you can stream him pretty much any given week if you want to.
Jones gets hit, throws it left, caught by Slayton, down the left sideline, 15, 10, 5, touchdown Giants, Darius Slayton.
Speaking of Darius Slayton, how are we feeling about this New York Giants wide receiving core this upcoming year? I think a lot of question marks there.
Yeah, it's pretty much garbage right now, but if they were able to do it last season with what they had, I think Waller's going to open up a lot of different possibilities and avenues. So who knows? They could still be good, but I think they're going to invest heavily in the draft in some bona fide receivers.
I think so too. You think you guys think Sterling Shepard or Darius Slayton can make their way to fantasy relevance this year?
I can't see anything happening with Shepard after an ACL and then an Achilles. I mean, that's just seems almost insurmountable, and it really sucks because I love his story. Slayton, maybe, but if they go out and get somebody in the draft, I don't really think so.
So when the hell did Sterling Shepard turn 30? I just feel like he's still 26.
On his birthday.
Oh, thanks, Joey. But he's the kind of player, it's probably because we haven't seen maybe complete seasons get put together with the level of hype that we've had for Sterling Shepard in the past, that it doesn't like, I don't view him as a failure. You know what I mean? We see some of these players in the NFL and it feels like they've gotten older, even though they're not performing. I just view him as like, hasn't broken out yet, but he's 30 years old. It's probably not happening.
Make bets and follow your fantasy team while you buy, sell, and trade collectibles in real time. Only on Better Sports Network.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show / Dynasty Nerds mega episode here on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course, the Road of His High Stakes Lowdown. He's Garret Price from DynastyNerds.com. You follow him on Twitter at Dynasty Price. Want to welcome in another special guest. You know him from this show. He's been on this show before. He is over at Player Profiler, a guy who is heading up a lot of podcasting, a lot of content over there right now. You follow him on Twitter at the OG Fantasy. Please welcome in Mr. Theo Gremminger. Theo, welcome on, man.
Eric, I'm just thinking about you playing quarterback and scrambling. I loved hearing about that. You're putting nightmares into some young like middle linebackers and safeties. I could just picture it.
All right, so I'll tell you this right now. It's a real quick story, I promise. Nobody else wants to hear it, but I'll tell it. I was in like this scrimmage that we did with a much bigger school, and it was sort of like, this is my junior year, so I wasn't starting, and we were going up against this much bigger school, much more talented guys, and I had one play where I was going to throw a quick slant, the guy was going to jump it, then I was going to my second read, he was covered, and I tucked it and I ran. I've got about 65, 70 yards. I got up, I spiked the ball down. I was so happy. My teammates are coming up to me, and there was like 3 separate penalties on my team on the play. So it never should have happened. It was like the best moment of my high school career, and it never happened, which is fine. These things happen, right? But listen, nobody cares about that. Let's get into what you have to say about this year's running backs class, which I know is a fun one. It's been a fun one to talk about and I know you've been doing it on all your podcasts and all your shows. I'm just kind of curious as we get into it, Theo. Number one, how do you rate this class compared to previous years for running backs in the NFL draft?
I would say that it's up there. Certainly we have the truly elite player at the top in Bijan Robinson. A player is one of the better running back prospects, maybe we've ever seen. And he kind of elevates the entire class. But I'm very excited about the depth of this class. I think we're going to have a little more clarity after the NFL draft. But there's like a large tier of players that I'm excited about. Even when we get past like running back 10, you can still find some guys to get excited about. So for me, I'm extremely bullish on this class. This is a class that has a chance to be a transformative one for Dynasty football, where we look back in 2 years, we're going to see multiple guys coming out of this class that are RB1s and certainly a lot of RB2 types. So I'm very, very bullish on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand why you're so bullish on it. I mean, there's a lot of like really, really talented prospects. There's good depth in this class. When we're looking at a player that is as elite as Bijan Robinson, let's say you're in a super flex league right now, how much is too much to give up to get a player like Bijan Robinson in a dynasty league?
So super flex is interesting. I could put it into context of a non-super flex league. I think you're talking about a player where you're not going to accept the 102 and a 2024 first for Bijan Robinson in most situations. And I think that that's kind of rare. I think in a super flex league, you have to weigh, how you are at quarterback, because Garrett, this, even a fantastic running back like Bijan Robinson, you can't keep a window in Dynasty where, hey, don't worry, I'll win this league in 4 years. I'll get Bijan this year, then I'll get my quarterback in a year or two. It's going to happen. Bijan is kind of the kind of player that, from a Dynasty perspective, can kind of mess up a rebuild, because he could be an immediately give you that 18 points per game type, right out the gate. And he could put you right smack dab in the middle of your league. And then a year from now, in a super flex format, you're priced out of a guy like Caleb Williams already. So he's a difficult guy to gauge for super flex. But I think for non-super flex, right now I would be looking at trying to get 3 first-round picks or the equivalent of. I think he's that impactful, especially when you talk about the scarcity at the running back position in terms of true bell cows. There's not a whole lot of them. And the fact that a lot of the running backs that we love for Dynasty are past the age apex, where, we can see them having a fantastic 2023, but a lot of these guys are going to be entering their 28, 29-year-old seasons, and those are the kind of guys we cannot bank on long-term.
Theo, when you're talking about 3 first-round picks, do they all have to be this year? Is that what you're looking for? Because obviously, if they're 2024, that's different valuation than 3 2023s, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was like an FFPC league, Eric, I think that it would be, if somebody offered me the 102 and the 112, I don't think that's getting it done.
Right.
Okay. If somebody offered me the 102 and maybe the 107 and then their blind 2024 first, I think that's the kind of value you can get for Bijan. I have seen Ken Walker and the 107 for Bijan in an FFPC league that go down pretty recently. We've seen Tony Pollard and 2 firsts go down in an FFPC league for Bijan. I completed one trade where I moved a Ken Walker and a DK Metcalf, and I received Bijan plus. I received a couple other guys with him, but that's the sort of value you're able to get for Bijan right now. And I do think when we get into Dynasty startup season, especially in non-Superflex, I think he's the 103 already in non-Superflex startups. I think he's right behind Chase and Jefferson. I think you go with Bijan. I think that's the kind of player he is. And I think that he's kind of a break the mold type in terms of trying to valuation, because when you get to a running back that could possibly average in that sort of McCaffrey-like outcome where you're talking about a 24 point per game kind of guy, those guys just don't grow on trees. He has the pass catching ability. He's a true 3-down back, and he's going to be the rare back that NFL teams use first round draft capital on, potentially top 10 draft capital on overall. So he really checks all the boxes.
One of the players that I think is, I don't want to say he's the consensus number 2, but he's pretty close as far as running backs in this draft go. Behind Robinson is Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, expectations for him at the pro level vary widely, Theo. I've heard the Alvin Kamara comparison. I don't necessarily think I'm on board with that. But Jahmyr Gibbs, when you look at him as an NFL running back as opposed to a collegiate running back, how do you think he's going to fare at the next level? And what kind of fantasy production should we expect from him? What type of running back is he going to be?
Well, I know for us at Player Profiler, we debated him, and I think that he's right now a fringe RB1 in Dynasty. There's a lot of red flags here. He's 199 pounds. You bring up Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is about 215. So that to me is it's a difficult one to make that comparison of. If you squint and you want to go way, way back in time, there's a little bit of Jamal Charles to him. That would be kind of a peak outcome, where the 199 scares a lot of people off, but I think it's and I know weight absolutely matters for running backs in the league. It's a grown man's league, but if he would have just weighed in at 202, there wouldn't have been these kind of concerns. So, I mean, I sure wish, Jahmyr Gibbs would have had a larger dinner the night before, maybe a bigger breakfast the morning of, or chugged a couple of gallons of water right before the weigh-in. But I do think he's a dynamic receiver, and I think that he's the sort of player that's going to command targets. And I think that he doesn't profile like a true bell cow ever, but he's the kind of guy that could be an 80 catch guy, could be a 75 catch guy. And those kind of guys drive our fantasy success. I think that there's a potential that we have to devalue him if he lands with a mobile quarterback that doesn't check down to the running backs. But if he lands in the sort of offense where either we have an innovative offensive coordinator or we have a pocket passer, then I feel great about him. It's a little bit of a risk with the weight, but I think he's dynamic, and I think he's a true pass catching weapon. And he was also a successful running back in 2 separate leagues, the SEC, the ACC before that. So I realize there's some risk, and there's certainly a large tier for me between 1 and 2, but I still have Gibbs as RB2.
You go from a player in Gibbs that is arguably one of the highest ceiling players, in this running back class, to a guy that is probably one of the highest floor players in Zach Charbonnet. Is he destined to be a guy that could be a true 3 down back. We saw what he did at UCLA and Chip Kelly's system, and that was a great offensive line that they had there. He's not the speed demon, but he does fit the prototypical size, speed, can catch the ball. Do you think there's enough there, and will he get the draft capital to be a 3 down back?
I'm really rooting for him to be a second-round draft pick. And I think that those little micro changes, do matter. I'd be more comfortable seeing him in the second than I would the third, because it would just show a willingness of an NFL team to really, really invest in him. I think he has the pass catching ability. He's a larger back, 215. He ran a fast enough 40, a highly successful player at UCLA. He also broke out at a young age at Michigan. He played ahead of Hassan Haskins, who's in the NFL right now. So he checks off a lot of boxes. I don't want to use the word boring, because I think that we, boring can be an okay thing. Do I think that he's got top 5 running back seasons in his range of outcomes? I don't, but I do think that he could be like a David Montgomery plus, where a guy that's going to give us continual fantasy success, and whether that's providing us low end RB1 numbers or, mid-level RB2 numbers, I think that he will hit one of those outcomes. I'd love to see him end up in a situation like Miami, where there's, potential for touches right away. I think he's not a dynamic receiver, but I think he's a good enough receiver that I think that's going to kind of keep him afloat.
Theo, I think I saw you tweet about this. Right now in your rankings, you have Robinson, Gibbs, Charbonnet, but you said after the draft, you might move Charbonnet ahead of Gibbs, right?
I think that there's a scenario for me where, if Charbonnet lands in a clear situation like Cincinnati, where we see the writing on the wall with Mixon, where it's not long for it, or a backfield where you can kind of paint a picture where it's his, and Gibbs lands, maybe a scrambling quarterback. I've seen some people get excited about like Gibbs potentially landing in Philadelphia. Like, I don't think that would be a good outcome for him at all. Like, I think a team like Philadelphia, where you have a quarterback who doesn't check down to the running backs, and a coach which likes to use a committee, like, I think that could keep a guy like Gibbs down. For me, it's still most likely going to be Jahmyr Gibbs as my RB2. But I'm open to the possibility that Charbonnet could leap him. It would have to be like Charbonnet landing perfectly and Gibbs landing very poorly for that to happen.
We're talking with, Theo Gremminger from playerprofiler.com. Follow him on Twitter at DOGFantasy. Roschon Johnson, Bijan Robinson's backup at Texas. If he ends up sneaking into the second round, man, we got to start taking this guy a lot more seriously in rookie drafts, right?
Well, I took him. I was in a Superflex draft last night on Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast with Matt Kelly, and we had a number of guests. It was a really good episode. We had Scott Connor on, we had Jax Falcone on, and I took him towards the tail end of the first round. So I'm high on Roschon, and I think that Roschon, it's looking like he could land in the second round. I think it's going to end up being the Cowboys. I just have a gut feeling that that's going to be.
Keep him in Texas.
It would be keep him in Texas, and you had the Bijan rumors. It's a little easier to put draft capital into a guy in the late 50s than it would be in the 20s. So, like, I think Roschon could land very well. We have him comped on our site to Josh Jacobs, and I think that he has that sort of outcome where he had opportunities to go elsewhere, and a lot of guys would have gone elsewhere for the playing time, but playing behind Bijan Robinson, we've had in the past 2 running backs come out of the same school in the same draft class. You think about the Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams year, most recently with Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. It's happened. But Roschon Johnson had a tremendous Senior Bowl, and I think that's what's done it for him. The combine the 40 was slightly disappointing. We heard rumors that he was going to, run sub 4.5. It didn't happen, but he tested well in some of the other metrics, and he is a larger back, and the NFL seems to like him a lot. And I think that the Senior Bowl, people put a lot of weight into that. If you go out and have a great couple of practices at the Senior Bowl, it happened with Michael Carter. It happened with Antonio Gibson, and I think it's going to happen with Roschon Johnson. And I think it's just there's certain little knocks, maybe health-wise and profile-wise, with some backs behind him. And I think he's kind of getting pushed up a little bit. I don't think it's like a Trey Sermon type situation where we're going to overdraft him. I think it's more of a the market finally coming correct on Roschon Johnson. We've had him high at Player Profiler for a while. You know, and the Senior Bowl was really what started his ascent with us. And I think people are generally starting to correct it. I think when we sit down and we do our non-Superflex rookie drafts, I think he's going to be going somewhere between 8 and 12, you know, in non-Superflex. I think that's a safe spot for him. And I think it's a place where he could return value. I think at the very least, he's a committee back in the league. And I think at the most, he could be a really nice, you know, I don't think he necessarily can be a 3-down workhorse, but I think that could happen. I think he's a little bit better receiver than people think, and he's got the size and the explosiveness.
One of the interesting Devy names, you know, if you play Devy, there's guys that, you know, are on a lot of teams and gain a lot of buzz in Devy circles. Sean Tucker was one of those guys that got a lot of Devy buzz for what he was doing at Syracuse. He's cooled off a little bit since his college days. He had some of the issues where he wasn't able to perform in the combine, but he did his own pro day and he posted it, and you know it was kind of comical. But now he's actually got a scheduled legitimate pro day. What are you looking for in that pro day, and are any of the numbers in there going to affect your feelings on him?
So I like Sean Tucker, and I think it's funny. You know, Garrett, we talk about like Devy take lock. A lot of people like can't get the you know, where we valued these guys 2 or 3 years ago out of their heads. For me, the only number that's going to really matter with Sean Tucker is the draft capital, because I like watching him on film, and I love the fact that he seems like he's healthy. And I know there's some guys that are really, really into him. Billy Muzio and I had Dwayne McFarland on yesterday, and Dwayne's model has Sean Tucker really high. But I think that I'd like to see Sean Tucker. I'm not going to be scared off by an early 4th round draft capital, but if he starts sliding into like the 5th round, there's too many backs in this class that I don't need to worry about things like health and draft capital, that I think I could move on from Sean Tucker. I like the fact that he's 21 years old. He's not a large back. He certainly was productive and explosive looking on film, but I'll root for him, but I don't necessarily need to use valuable rookie picks on a guy that's going that late.
Theo, just to kind of like this is more of an all-encompassing question here for you. Relative athletic score, how much emphasis do you put on that when evaluating a prospect? You know, like these running backs prospects that we've been talking about. How much does that factor into like, okay, this is going to be one of my guys, this is not going to be one of my guys? Big? Is it significant? Is it small? Does that have any impact for you?
It certainly does. I think that athleticism at the running back position matters. It matters to the NFL. And it certainly should matter to us. I don't want to completely shut the door on a guy. Like, I'm not if somebody doesn't run, you know, in the 4.5s, I'm not like closing the door on him. But we certainly want to see running backs who are explosive. We want to see running backs who have size. And if they are undersized, we want to see them fly. Mm-hmm. So I think that using these kind of metrics, not being like take locked on them, but using the metrics, I think we absolutely have to do it because the NFL teams do it.
I want to ask you about Pittsburgh running back Israel Abanikanda. Now, I can't remember when I had you on if we talked about him or not, but I do know in my conversations with high-stakes players, in all the shows that I do, one of the last questions I always ask them, give us a sleeper for the upcoming NFL draft, who's a player that not a lot of people are talking about. And I feel like Israel Abanikanda can no longer be a sleeper, because literally everybody's talking about, like, every time I ask that question, Abanikanda's name always comes up. And I feel like I don't want to say we're sitting on a gold mine, but man, there is a lot to like about this prospect, isn't there?
Absolutely. Like, Abanikanda is a guy that we've been high on, but now it's getting to the point where he's getting steamed up. And you do have to worry about that a little bit. Cody Carpenter has some questions about his vision, you know, more of like a straight line, kind of like athletic back. But I think that those sort of guys can develop into like one cut backs in the NFL and find success. I think that we have a nice comparison for him with Tevin Coleman, where he could be a big play type guy. I don't know if he's going to command a backfield to himself, but I mean, we're talking about like the age of running back by committee. And I think Abanikanda is explosive enough. He's athletic enough that I think he can get better. And Garrett, like the vision thing, like Cody brings that up, but I think the fact that he can get more nuanced in his game. He's 20 years old right now. So I love the fact that he's younger. And this year he did take a huge leap in terms of production, without Kenny Pickett there. So we did see that big leap. And he's a hell of an athlete. It doesn't take a whole lot to just watch the workout to see that vertical, to see that 40. He certainly looks the part. That's another guy that we want to see the NFL invest in him, because I think that there's a chance he sneaks in the third round. If that happens, Eric, the hype train is going to be nonstop in these FFPC leagues.
It's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So who else do we need to know about, when looking at our rookie drafts? I know I have a guy that we haven't covered that I love. So I'll throw this name out as one of them. You don't have to talk about him. You can talk about somebody else. But I'm a big Tyjae Spears guy. Love his tape. Love what he brings to the table. Is that a guy you're interested in, or are there other guys in this class that we haven't brought up that you think need a little bit of attention?
No, I love Tyjae. I think that he's another guy that did very, very well at the Senior Bowl. And it's funny because at Tulane, he had some of his best success in their big games. I mean, people talk about the USC game where he just ran to daylight, but they had multiple games against like Cincinnati, Central Florida, pretty much any ranked team. He put up ridiculous numbers. And then for us to kind of get excited about him, we wanted to see him weigh in at a certain weight. And he did go over 200 pounds, which I think was a big hurdle for him. So a lot of times we see these guys that are listed a little lighter and then they go get actually weighed and it's disappointing. So Tyjae, like hitting the over 200 pounds, I think is big for him. And I think he does profile like a guy who can catch passes in the league. So I'm into Tyjae Spears. I think that he's the kind of he's a great example of like this class, Garrett, because if he lands well in the fourth, I'm all about Tyjae Spears. And I think he could creep into that third. I think a lot of times it's difficult for us to project where these guys are going to get drafted because you get like that cascade effect where once Bijan goes, some other team's going to have Jahmyr Gibbs on their board. They might push him up to the end of the first. We're thinking he's going to be a second rounder. And then once you start seeing these other running backs go, some teams might not risk guys falling to day 3. So you might see like a long string of running backs drafted. If you look at the tail end of the second round up to about 15 to 20 picks into the third, it's like that sweet spot for running backs. It's all these teams who need running backs. You could see, 6 or 7 of them go in that segment of the draft. And I think that would push up a lot of them, at least for us in Dynasty. It seems kind of simplistic, but all you have to do, Eric, is go and look at the top 24 scorers to running back 1s to running back 2s every single year. And you're going to see so many guys that are day 1 or day 2 picks. Mm-hmm. So we really, really want to see that from some of these guys. But yeah, I'm into Tyjae. I like him a lot.
It seems like, Theo, you are on, I don't want to say every podcast, but maybe 99% of fantasy football podcasts, you're on them right now, which I love because you are such a brilliant mind when it comes to not only fantasy football, but Dynasty fantasy football as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on at Player Profiler and what you're doing for playerprofiler.com right now as well?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So you can find my written work at Player Profiler. I still write a lot of Dynasty content. I write some redraft content, and I do our waiver wire article during the season. I'm on the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast with Matt Kelly and Alan Soslowski. We're on every single Tuesday. I'm doing First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio. We had Dwayne McFarlane on yesterday, and we actually had Jared Smola on today. So that's been a nice new podcast. I have another podcast starting up called Press Coverage that we're going to aim to start sometime after the NFL draft. And then I'm still with the GOAT District, Eric, once a week. We're talking great stuff in the GOAT District. I highly recommend the GOAT District to everyone. It's a fantastic podcast. So, and then Eric, I have about 1 million FFPC leagues where I have my rookie drafts coming up, and I'm trying to get a bunch of trades done. I actually put out 2 articles on Player Profiler. You can read the trades that I've actually made. So I have full transparency with these trades. You can love them, you can hate them, but I'm putting them out there for everyone to read. And I'm trying to ship a bunch of FFPC leagues. Last year was a good one for me, Dynasty-wise. And I have a couple of 101s, Eric. So I'm going to end up with a couple of Bijan Robinsons. And I'm excited about that.
You should be excited about that. We're excited to have you at the OG Fantasy on the Twitter machine, playerprofiler.com. Theo Gremminger. Theo, thanks so much for joining us tonight, man. I learned a lot, and I know our viewers did too.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed chopping up with you and Garrett. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you. Theo Gremminger, ladies and gentlemen, from playerprofiler.com and the GOAT District. We are just getting warmed up. In fact, I think we are warmed up now. We've stretched. We're limbered up. We're ready to talk Dynasty rookie receivers. Garrett has some thoughts on this year's class as well. That is coming up here in hour number 2 of our 4-hour extravaganza of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show and the Dynasty Nerds program as well, dynastynerds.com and FFPC meshing together for a 4-hour mashup mega show tonight. We're just getting started, ladies and gentlemen. We got Shane Hallam coming up in hour number 2. We have a real NFL mock draft coming up in hour 3, and then a Dynasty rookie draft coming up in hour number 4. It's mind-blowing tonight. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are. He's Garrett Price from dynastynerds.com at Dynasty Price. I'm at Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network.
The 5-Pack with Kyle Elfrink, weekdays from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Jalen Hurts has got a new contract. It is 5 years, $255 million. Now, if you follow anything in the NFL, you know the argument is always about guaranteed money. That's why Lamar Jackson's holding out. Lamar Jackson's winning like $230 million guaranteed. Jalen Hurts reportedly is getting $180 million guaranteed. Now, that sets a new standard. Lamar Jackson says the standard is Deshaun Watson. The rest of the NFL says it's not. Now the standard is $180 million. So I just want Lamar Jackson to hear this. Jalen Hurts today was more than happy to take $180 million guaranteed. Jalen Hurts has probably not accomplished as much as Lamar Jackson, but in a manner of speaking, and this is just my opinion, Jalen Hurts started from a weaker spot than did Lamar Jackson when he came to the NFL. Both guys were seen as a bit of a project. Both guys were seen as more runner than thrower. To me, Lamar Jackson has improved slightly as a thrower, but is still mostly a runner. Jalen Hurts has improved an incredible amount as a thrower, and he's done it in a lot more of a quick time frame than Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts has arrived in the NFL as an unfinished product. It's not finished, but the polishing and the improvement has been off the charts. Much better than Lamar Jackson. And Jalen Hurts more than happy to take $180 million guaranteed. Lamar Jackson not. Lamar Jackson's still holding out. Now, those aren't the only two quarterbacks thinking about money today. Kudos to Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson's still pouting. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. I will tell you this. At some point in the next month, I would suggest one, if not both those guys, Burrow and Herbert, will do even better than Jalen Hurts in terms of guaranteed money. Because that's what this is about. It's ego. That's what these guys love. He gets 180, Burrow will go 182, and Herbert will go 185. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson will still be pouting and saying, why am I not getting 230? Maybe he comes to his senses after all this. Who knows? But Eagles get it taken care of. Jalen Hurts signed, sealed, and delivered. A lot of guaranteed money.
Make bets and follow your fantasy team while you buy, sell, and trade collectibles in real time. Only on Better Sports Network.
Four minutes past the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show Dynasty Nerds mega episode. It is a 4-hour mashup. By the way, if you are just tuning in to this show for the first time, or Dynasty Nerds, which is coming up here at the top of the hour, this is the show. This is Fantasy Football Night in America here on the Better Sports Network. 7 to 9, High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. 9 to 11, Dynasty Nerds. Garrett Price is the host of that. I'm the host of this one. I'm Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman. He is from Dynasty Nerds. His name is Garrett Price. You follow him on Twitter at Dynasty Price. Hey, just to let everybody know, you can have the Better Sports Network, actually the newsletter, emailed to you each and every day. The only place to get our daily Better Bet. exclusive offers, program alerts, special events, and our top moments is the Better Sports Network newsletter. Register for free right now at bettersports.com. I want to thank Theo Gremminger for coming on in hour number 1. We are going to get into hour number 2 here, and we're going to talk about the wide receivers in this draft. Now, Garrett, checking out your Twitter, I know you have some strong feelings on this year's class. Before I ask you how many of these guys are going to be picked in the first round, it's probably been a while for you since you've seen a class that is this underwhelming. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that the way you feel about it?
No, that's 100% accurate. Every year I put together my nerd score is what we call it. And so myself and Jared Wackerly, we both had the privilege of getting to play college football. And so we watched a lot of film over the years. And so we took that love of watching film and we put it into fantasy football. And so this is our 4th year of developing scores. My personal scores, if we were to put this year's class and the 2022 class together, if we were to put these two classes together, there would only be, for me, pre NFL, this is just their college tape grade, there would only be 2 guys that made the top 12 from this year's class. So if that's any indication, and granted, there's some guys that I'm a little lower on in this class than other people are, and we'll talk about some of those players, but we don't have the nice top first tier of 3-4 receivers that are just absolute studs, no worries about miss it. Like, we don't have that this year. So it does make things very interesting.
So when you talk about those 2 receivers, that would be top 12 guys. Jackson Smith and Jigba's 1, right?
Absolutely.
And number 2 for you is who?
Number 2 ended up being Zay Flowers, which surprised me a little bit. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about him coming into the process, but I do my best to like scrub my brain of everything that I know about these players, any preconceived biases, anything like that, and just watch the tape. And when I watched his tape, he has a really, really unique movement pattern. And it was funny because the other night I was going to talk about, like, it reminds me the way he moves. I don't think he's as good as this player, but he moves similar to Tyreek Hill. But I was like, I'm not going to say that on the Nerds podcast because everyone's going to freak out and say I'm comping him to Tyreek Hill, which I'm not. Just saying there's movement patterns that remind me of each other. Well, then, of course, the next day he goes out and catches passes from Patrick Mahomes. And I'm like, well, there it is. Done and done. But just how it works sometimes, man.
Yeah.
But he's a good pass catcher. He's not going to win a lot in contested catches because he's a little bit of a smaller guy. Not that precludes you from contested catches, but that's not his forte. But you get the ball in his hands in the open field, and he's going to make a lot of guys miss and a lot of guys look silly.
Are those the only 2 receivers that go in round 1 of the 2023 NFL draft?
If I were to place my bet, yeah, I think those are the only 2 guys that are going in the first round. And I know, is it in the realm of possibility that Addison could go? Is it in the realm of possibility that Johnston could go? Or, some of these guys, Josh Downs? Like, yes, it's definitely possible. But you're looking at this year's class compared to a lot of other years. The NFL has been infused with tons of young receiving talent. The need for it is always there, but teams have gotten a lot more out of it in the past 3 or 4 seasons than they had previously. So it's not like many teams are just super thirsty for these guys where they'd be willing to overdraft them. I mean, last year we had 6-7 guys go. I think Josh Dotson was like the 6th wide receiver off the board to the Commanders in the middle of the first round. Like, we had tons of guys go early on. So I don't think that the urgency is there as much for NFL teams this year. And I think that matches up with the lack of talent that we have in this class.
So with Zay Flowers, before you started digging deep on this guy, I don't feel like you were that high on him. And then once you actually grinded the tape, crunched the numbers, all of a sudden Zay Flowers like, man, you know what? This could be an exciting player for dynasty leagues now.
That's 100% how it went. And sometimes it happens the opposite. We were talking about Sean Tucker earlier. I was one of those Devy guys that loved Sean Tucker. Like, I was so excited when we were drafting before we really dug into the tape, and all I had seen was highlights and watched him at Syracuse and things like that. Before that, I had him as the number 3 back in the class. Now he's like my number 10, 11 back in the class,
Yes.
and so that's just how it goes sometimes. And it's really tempting to say, I liked this guy for a reason, I'm going to stick on it. No, you got to go back to the tape. You got to go back to the numbers. You got to go back to your strong suit. And that's what I did. And for me, there was just a lot of concerns there. The opposite happened with Zay Flowers. I wasn't very high on the player coming into the process, but watching the tape, watching some of the things that he can do, some of his movements, his elusiveness is just off the charts. So I had to move him up.
Zay Flowers works out with Patrick Mahomes, which you already alluded to. Smokescreen, is there something here? Because any receiver that goes to Kansas City to catch passes from Patrick Mahomes, obviously you're going to be very excited about. There's no Tyreek Hill there anymore. Now there's no Juju Smith-Schuster. You have Kadarius Toney, who, Farrell Elliott, my Friday night co-host, always says the best ability in the NFL is availability. This dude has not always been all that available. You have him. You have, obviously Travis Kelce's still there. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, okay, we get it. And then Sky Moore, who really underwhelmed last year, but, the 2023 is a new season. If Zay Flowers will go to Kansas City, man, people are going to lose their minds drafting this guy in the top 3, top 4 picks of non-superflex leagues. I think about the FFPC Dynasty Rookie Leagues. People are going to be falling all over themselves to try to trade up for this guy.
Yeah, they absolutely will. It's a match made in heaven. And then the Hill comps really will start going as soon as that happens. So it will be really interesting to see how we react to the NFL draft in general, but specifically some of these guys that get those huge landing spot bumps. We didn't have as many of those last year as we've had in the past, but those landing spot bumps can really just elevate people.
Sedated Fork is in the YouTube chat, and they say that, or they ask, is Zay kind of jerky in his route running? Is that what you saw on the tape when you were looking at Zay Flowers, that maybe he's not as smooth as we would hope him to be?
Yeah, and that's when I was talking about some of his movement patterns, it's a little bit unorthodox. It's not Jackson Smith and Jigba that is just silky smooth and everything. Like he's a little more jerky, a little more, herky jerky, like all over the place. But at the end of the day, we need them to get open. We need them to make people miss. As unorthodox as it may be, he is one of the most elusive guys in the class. Now, sometimes that can be frustrating for quarterbacks because, he can ad-lib a little bit more with some of his routes than maybe some other guys would do and things like that. But that also is frustrating for defensive backs because that's tough for them to read, guys that aren't using the same step patterns that other guys are using, guys that are not using the same precise routes that other guys are using, that are ad-libbing a little bit more. That can be really difficult on those DBs, and sometimes that allows for a little more separation.
Jordan Addison was a player that won the Biletnikoff Award catching passes at Pittsburgh from Kenny Pickett. He ended up transferring to USC. And he's there's still a chance that he could go in the first round of the NFL draft this year. But I know his 2022 season was not what he envisioned, hooking up with the Heisman Trophy Award winner in Caleb Williams. You look at what he did at Pittsburgh, the numbers that he put up there, the fact that he did it so young, that's rare. And we love rare. We look for rare stuff when we're trying to evaluate these guys. But then he goes to USC with a better quarterback in Caleb Williams. Man, you had to be so excited for this. Didn't really come together for him. And now what do we see? We see one of the big knocks on him is we've never seen a receiver this small potentially being drafted this high or do this well at the combine. How it's kind of the same question I asked you with Bryce Young in the first hour, Garrett.
Yeah.
Is Jordan Addison big enough for you to want to invest in him in a dynasty league?
So he did end up becoming my wide receiver 3 in this class when it was all said and done. More out of, I had to put somebody there more so than anything else. When I broke down the tape, like I said, you combine the two classes, he doesn't make the top 12 from the past 2 years. So he got a 73.3 for me, just for reference points. We had a 76 for Zay Flowers, and in the high 78s for Jackson Smith and Jigba. So he was significantly lower than those two guys. And then, his score is not that far off from the wide receiver 13 in this class for me, which is Trey Palmer. So that's the thing. I think NFL teams are going to look at some of these guys. And granted, the reason I put Addison there, I think he is one of the safer guys in the sense of he does everything the right way. He's very smooth operator. He's a very smart player. He understands defenses and what they're trying to do and the leverage. Like, he gets all of that on a much higher level than I think some other prospects do. And because of that, I do think he's very safe. And I do think he'll be a productive fantasy football player. That doesn't necessarily mean he's ever going to be a wide receiver 1 or 2 for your fantasy team. But I think he can still be a good wide receiver 3, flex play, a guy you can count in that sense. So that's why he's there. But, I think NFL teams are going to look at these guys and say, is Jordan Addison drastically different than a guy that I can get in the 4th round? I don't know. He might be a little bit better, but not a lot. Maybe I'll just save 2 rounds worth of picks, take a defensive tackle in the 2nd round instead, and just wait and take one of these other guys, Tyler Scott, Trey Palmer, one of those kind of guys later on in the draft, and see what I can do.
Dynasty philosophy question here. It seems like this is a very top-heavy draft. JSN, and you mentioned Zay Flowers and obviously Bijan Robinson. We talked about some of the running backs too. Maybe you're better off if you are on the clock. And I always love to do this when I'm on the clock, because it seems like that's when I can get the most out of these picks if I'm going to trade them. Move these guys for 2024 first. Now, I know the old adage of, oh yeah, here we are in 2023. It's not that great a class, but next year's class. That's what it always is every single year. Everybody's talking of like, oh, next year's class is going to be so amazing, so amazing. But when you literally are on the clock here at 109, 110, and none of these guys are really, tripping your trigger, then I think that's the time to spring forward and start moving these guys or these picks for 2024 picks, 2024 first and maybe plus at that point. I think that's how you're viewing the talent in this draft, unless I'm hearing you differently on this, Garrett.
No, you're right. And that's something I do like to do. Usually I won't just take a first from next year unless it looks like it's going to probably be a top 2 or 3 guy. Then I'll take just that. But otherwise, I want a second back, because I got to wait a whole year. That's an empty spot on my roster. That kind of thing. That's what I'm pitching when I'm talking to these guys. But also, I am not opposed to it. And Rich Dotson, who's going to come on during the second half of the show, he talked about it, and we're going to talk about it more next week. There's nothing wrong with trading for veteran players at that point. There are other established receivers that you already know what you're getting from them on their teams, where they're at. Why take the risk with a guy that you don't really like that much when there is a guy that you do like already doing it? So sometimes, especially in the second half of those drafts, I think it's a great time to look at the DJ Moores of the world, the Terry McLaurins of the world, the Jahan Dotsons, those types of guys where you've seen it from them already. Those are the kind of guys I want to go after that still have at least a little bit of youth on their side.
I can't remember. I mean, it was like 10 plus years ago when I started playing Dynasty fantasy football for the first time. And I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing.
For sure. We all
we all were. Yeah. And I traded, I was on the clock at 108 in the rookie draft, and there's nobody I liked. And some guy said, "Hey man, I'll give you my first round next year for this." And his team was awful. I'm like, yeah, this is, I'll totally do this. Well, I don't know if it was necessarily because of that pick alone. I can't remember who he picked, but he ended up having a pretty good season. So when I traded the 108 in whatever year it was for next year's first, it ended up being the 109 the following year. So I had to wait a full year, Garrett, and then pick one pick later. It was one of the most frustrating, but I learned from it, which is all we're trying to do. We learn, and I'll tell you this. Here's what I learned over the course of this past year. Last year I want to say this time, because it was right after the NFL draft, and we're already looking forward to the following NFL draft. I heard Kayshon Boutte's name over and over again. This guy is going to be a stud. Could be the first receiver off the board next year. Kayshon Boutte. And I was like, okay, I'm going to file that name away. And now this year, this is a guy that I've seen some people say that there's a non-zero chance that he might not even be drafted into the NFL. Now, I don't think that's the case, but certainly there's a possibility. What happened? What did he do so wrong at LSU his final year to tumble so far? I'm looking at some rookie rankings right now, and he's outside the top 10 at wide receivers. What happened to Kayshon Boutte? And more importantly, Garrett, how concerned should we be about this if we're choosing to draft him in our Dynasty rookie drafts coming up in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I don't want to slander the guy because nothing's been confirmed, but there's a lot of rumors as to why he said he was going back to LSU and then all of a sudden switched and decided, no, just kidding, I'm going out for the NFL draft. There's a lot of rumblings down in the bayou as to why that happened. So there's some off the field question marks. He was always in Brian Kelly's doghouse, it seemed like. And then he had a tough injury, which if you watch his early tape versus his later tape in this past season, he does not look like the same guy. When you watch him at the combine, it looks like he didn't even prep for it. So there's a lot of just question marks as to, is this guy just a schmuck? Like, hopefully not. Hopefully he's awesome and he performs great and he's great for a team. But you have to worry about that because there are other guys that could be great sleepers in the second, third rounds that you could be taking, as opposed to a guy that might just self-implode. So that's the thing that you're worried about. And that's the type of thing that NFL GMs are going to have to look at and see if that's what they are worried about. And you as fantasy players, you have to decide that same type of thing too. So that's the question mark. And when we get back to the tape, I didn't love his tape. Even going back to his freshman season, most of those big touches, there were a couple that were like, ooh, that was nice. But there were a lot of them that were just broken plays where it was just wide open down the field. So it's tough to really know if he's that guy.
And for my, it's always about draft capital, right? So if this guy gets drafted high, okay, we start respecting him a little bit more. But if he doesn't, we don't have to. And as far as Dynasty draft capital goes, and he's going to tumble, and you can get him for much cheaper. And then at that point, you got to weigh the pros and cons of it. And the pros might start outweighing the cons when he becomes free in Dynasty drafts. There's some other stuff. I'd take your chance. Exactly. There's some other stuff I want to get into here. Now, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I felt like A.T. Perry was talked a lot more than he's being talked about now. And I know he's tumbled down Dynasty rankings at all a little bit over the course of the last month or two. Can you give us your read on A.T. Perry? Is this guy slipping? Is this a guy that we should be concerned about? And if he gets into the right spot, how excited should we be?
So he was one of those guys where I was really excited to watch his tape, kind of the opposite of Zay Flowers, where, I was kind of like, yeah, we'll see. And then I end up being really, impressed. It was kind of the opposite with A.T. Perry, because this was one of the guys with size in this class. There's a lot of, smaller, skinny guys, short guys. This was one of the guys that could, really do something because of his build. But watching him play, he ended up getting, I've graded 25 receivers, and he has the third lowest score for me as far as his tape went. So I ended up being extremely disappointed watching him play. Really stiff, not explosive. There were moments where you would see flashes of some of that big playability, but for somebody as big as him, he didn't actually perform very well in contested catch situations, which would be his forte. So I ended up being pretty disappointed when I ended up watching his tape.
So A.T. Perry, not necessarily a guy that we should be super excited about, and I get that. Tennessee, I feel like this has been the Tennessee show. We talked about Hendon Hooker. Now we're going to talk about Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. I know there's a lot of people that are very excited about Jalen Hyatt, and I think that you would say that, hey, maybe more people should be excited about Cedric Tillman. How do these two volunteer receivers compare with each other as far as what's in store for them at the next level, Garrett?
Yeah, they ended up getting very, very close scores for me. I actually ended up having Tillman just a hair higher on mine. And part of that was just because he can do a little bit more, I think. He's got the size and the physical build that you want. Hands were fantastic, whether it's the routine or the spectacular catch. He was aggressive at the catch point. One of the more physical receivers that I've scouted. There was a lot to like on there. And Hyatt, he's tough because he seems like an incredible best ball pick. I think I would love him in best ball. But if I'm trying to start him week in, week out, I'm a little terrified because he profiles as a more traditional Z than he does as an X. And I think people are wanting him to be a featured target. But this is a player that will probably be taking the top off the defense, and he's going to get some bomb targets every week. How many of those will he convert? We don't know. He might have weeks where he got 4 catches for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. There might be other weeks where he got 7 targets, but he only caught 2 of them for 15 yards. So I think there could be some real up and down Deshaun Jackson type of stuff there. And his route tree, partly due to where he was playing, but he didn't have a super diverse route tree. I think his hands are really solid. So I want to like him more than I did, but there's enough there in his profile. And I didn't even mention in press coverage. Dude, like, never had to face press coverage at all. They would always either put him in the slot or they would stack him. And anytime he did see press coverage, it was bad news bears. So there's enough concerns there, despite the potential, because the potential is also there. But there was enough concerns where he ended up, moving down my list of guys a little bit. He's right around wide receiver 10 for me.
When we talked with the loss of Allen Lazard here and I'm getting back to my Packers coverage here that I do here in Wisconsin. Allen Lazard got lost to the New York Jets, but I know there's a lot of fans up here that see some Allen Lazard in Xavier Hutchinson, not only because they both went to the same college in Iowa State, but there's some similarities in their games. Now, we don't necessarily care about the blocking aspect for fantasy, although maybe we should, because that usually means they're out on the field a little bit more opportunities to score, more opportunities to catch. But if I'm going to ask you who the bigger sleeper is for fantasy football, Raheem Jarrett or Xavier Hutchinson, what would your answer be?
That's tough because you picked two guys I really like. So you made, that was a great question because you made it super tough on me. I would say I think Xavier Hutchinson's probably the safer sleeper pick. He is a guy that has the size, has the ability, but very fluid for a guy that is as big as he is. And there were times where, and this doesn't happen very often, I watch a lot of tape where I was watching him and he would make a catch and I would audibly, like out loud, go, "Oh, wow," or "Oh, snap," or "Oh, something," because like he would just make a catch where it was really impressive the way that he was able to not only track down the ball, but then be able to contort his body to be able to catch it. So there was a lot of movement skills that I liked for a bigger player in this class. Now, when you get to Raheem Jarrett, I had this whole like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory on Dynasty Nerds, and the guys laughed at me because they didn't think it was as big of a conspiracy as I thought it was. But I'm fairly convinced that like him and Stephon Diggs are clones somehow. Like, first of all, they both went to Maryland. Both were 5-star recruits coming out of high school, which Maryland doesn't get a lot of 5-star recruits. For them to be at the same position, both 5 stars, both of them disappointed during their time. Both of them, their best season ever was 800 yards. Both of them are exactly 6 feet tall. Both of them weighed between 190 and 195 pounds. One ran a 4.44, one ran a 4.46 in the 40. They jumped within a half inch of each other in the vertical jump. And, oh, yeah, the offensive coordinator for Stephon Diggs all those years ago went to Alabama for a while, came back, and is now the head coach of Maryland. So it's the same guy calling plays for both of these players. I don't think he's going to be as good as Stephon Diggs. So, as much as I have fun with that, like, I don't think he's going to be that guy. But he is a very raw athlete that does great things with the ball in his hand that was just underdeveloped. And so I think if he goes to the right place, to the right team that will coach him up, he could be one of these guys that we're like, well, where did Jarrett come from? Because he's got a lot of the things that you like.
And in regards to Jarrett versus Diggs, I'll channel True Detective's Russ Cole when he says, "Time is a flat circle." And that is your horrible Matthew McConaughey impression for the evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Well done.
Done. Thank you so much. Thank you. The other receivers we haven't got to, you brought up a few names tonight. We haven't really got into them a whole lot, but I think about a guy like Trey Palmer. We haven't talked about Jonathan Mingo, but I know he's picking up some steam a little bit, as well as Dontavian Wicks. You don't necessarily talk about any of those guys, but any other sleepers that the viewing audience should know about as we prep for this NFL draft a week from today?
Definitely Mingo. Mingo ended up being in the top 5 for me. It's one of those production versus like traits. I think is the best way to put it. Production versus traits. He didn't have the production, and so I think that's why he was a little bit overlooked. But I mean, look at some of the receivers that have been put out from Ole Miss over the past few years. DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Elijah Moore. Like, they've been putting out some good receivers, even though the numbers weren't always, amazing. Some of them they were pretty good, but they weren't always amazing. But you watch his tape, And there were a lot of times where he's getting open, he's making plays, he's doing things that we're not seeing out of other guys in this class. And if you told me 3 years from now he ended up being the number 2 receiver in this class, I would not be shocked. I think he has all of the traits. It's how much can he develop all of those traits to become a legitimate NFL wide receiver.
We've hit on the quarterbacks. We've hit on the running backs. Now Garrett has given us the rundown on wide receivers. The one position we haven't hit yet, it's tight ends, and it's coming up next. From Draft Countdown, we have Shane Hallam coming up. We're going to discuss one of the best tight end classes I can remember. We're getting into Kincaid and Mayer, Musgrave. We're going to talk about Laporta, Darnell Washington, all these guys. It's on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, Dynasty Nerds Mega Mashup here on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Garrett Price. Shane Hallam coming up. Don't go anywhere. This is BSN.
Moose and Keith. Weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern.
The word genius is there. Bob Glover, it describes him. Bob, so when's the last time that Twitter defeated you? Because I've been defeated by Twitter today.
I'll tell you how Twitter defeated me one time. I had the mistaken impression that the year that Troy Polamalu won the Defensive Player of the Year, it looked like it was going to go to Clay Matthews Jr., and I tweeted it. And there was a guy on the media bus. He was like, oh, yeah, he's got it, a guy I trust. I won't tell you who it was, but his initials are Mike Garafolo. So I went with it. Got a DM from Rich Eisen, NFL Network. He goes, you sure about that? I go, oh, man. Oh, I just got this wave. Because, like, accuracy to me is really important.
Yeah.
So I'm literally on the media bus. We're just getting back from media day. We are slipping and sliding in Dallas. It's snowing. I get off the bus. I open my laptop. I am hunched over. And I just, like, literally people are passing me. Bob, what's wrong? And it was Polamalu. And Adam Schefter had retweeted me. Trey Wingo had retweeted me. I'm like, oh, I'm dead.
So when it's Polamalu, then how do you handle that? Like, what was the subsequent tweet
I think
afterwards?
I said, got some bad Twitter info. I didn't put Garafalo's name on there. I had to
10 years later, you can out him. I like that. Yeah.
You know, he wouldn't mind that. He knows the stories.
Yeah.
He actually said to me, hey, Bob, I think you might have jumped the gun on that. I was like, oh, crap. There we go.
Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Would Dion bench Shador?
I don't think he would.
Like, how bad would it have to be? Because we've seen horrendous quarterback play from this Colorado team for the last, 5 years? JT Shroud, Brandon Lewis, just terrible quarterback play. Like, they were 131st, which is dead last in pass EPA per play. Obviously, it will be better, but how bad does it have to be for him to bench his own son? Like, I'm not sure he will ever either, like, especially with the attitude that he came in with.
If they don't get Rashada, who do they bench him for this year anyway? I don't know that there's another answer on that roster that you go to. They don't really have a guy behind him, so I don't even know if we would know the answer to that until the next year, assuming that, he doesn't declare for the draft, he returns, they bring somebody else that's competent and behind him.
If they're going to do this the Lincoln Riley way, next year would be the class to bring somebody in. Shador Sanders is going to be a third-year player, so he's going to play 2023. I don't think he's declaring for the 2024 NFL draft, so he's going to play in 2024 and then declare for the 2025 NFL draft. And let's remember this, he hasn't had a full recruiting cycle at Colorado. He will have that next recruiting cycle, so maybe he could get one of these class of 2024 quarterbacks there to come to Colorado.
However you're invested in sports, from betting to fantasy, collectibles, and more, join our community on Better Sports Network.
Minutes until the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show / Dynasty Nerds Mega Mashup episode here. It is Fantasy Football Night in America on the Better Sports Network. He's Garrett Price from Dynasty Nerds. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the HSFF, the Road of His High Stakes Slowdown. I want to welcome in our special guest, our next special guest tonight, as we are full of them tonight. Draft Countdown, Debbie Marketplace, Dynasty League Football, at Shane P. Hallam on Twitter. Please welcome in Shane Hallam. Shane, thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight, man.
No, thanks for having me, Garrett, Eric. You two are two of the best in the business, so I appreciate you bringing me in. It's exciting to talk about this when we're a week away.
You may be right about Garrett, and you may be right about all these tight ends, but your analysis on fantasy football hosts in the industry when it comes to me is clearly skewed. Now, I'm just telling you this right now. Like, don't take Shane's misuse of me of thinking I'm one of the best of the business because I can't listen to what he has to say about tight ends. You are spot on this, my friend. I want to ask you, number one, off the bat, when is the last time you remembered a tight end class as good and as deep as the one we're going to see this year?
I think it's been a while. I think especially when you talk about the depth of a class, trying to find the type of day one and day two tight ends like this group has. Man, I mean, it's been a while because I think what we're seeing is kind of that strength in day two. So maybe 2017, we had OJ Howard and Evan Ingram and David Njoku. That was kind of a little more dynamic group. I think this group's a lot more rock solid and NFL types. And I think that's going to make them move up the draft boards really well.
All right. So for the longest time, it was the Michael Mayer show. He was the 101. He was the guy. But now, since the season's ended, there's a lot of love for Dalton Kincaid and even a few other guys. Is Mayer still the top guy, or has Kincaid or somebody else passed him?
I think Mayer's still the top guy. Honestly, I think he's been the top guy from the beginning. I think it is. Kincaid's really good, and he's an athletic pass-catching tight end. We saw the numbers he put up this year. I think that dominating game against USC where Dalton Kincaid just knows how to find the hole in the zone, catch the football, and after the catch, run you over, move around you. He has those skills. You watch him like, oh, yeah, this is an NFL tight end. But Michael Mayer did it at 18 years old, and he was dominating defenses at 18. Mayer may not have the athletic upside. I think he may not have the blocking. He may not always have, kind of the firm after the catch height. But, man, I mean, he's sure-handed. He knows how to find the zone coverage he kills. And then man coverage, but I think Michael Mayer is just as good. He's not going to get wide open on you, but if you try to contest him, he's tough. And the fact that he can do everything, and like I said, do it for 3 straight years, I think that's going to sell NFL teams. I think Mayer goes first in the draft. I don't think Kincaid's that far behind him. And I think when you toss in the back injury for Kincaid, he had some of the 11 visits out of the 32 teams. I think people are looking at the back for Kincaid. Some teams, probably the doctors are going to give the thumbs down. I think most are going to give the thumbs up. He might be off some boards. I think that pushes Mayer up a little bit as the first tight end off.
All right, so and that's fine. You make a good argument for Mayer, but if you're, and we were talking about swinging for the fences in Dynasty rookie drafts and trying to, not produce a good fantasy football team, but a dominant fantasy football team. Does Kincaid represent a higher ceiling than Mayer? No disagreement for me. I think Mayer has a higher floor than Kincaid, but Kincaid long term, is he a guy that has a pretty good chance of outproducing Mayer, or are you still Mayer for highest ceiling as well, Shane?
I'm still Mayer for highest ceiling. I think sometimes we get too caught up in fantasy and ceiling, right? Like that class I talked about before was, OJ Howard's the ceiling play. You got to take him top 5. Evan Ingram, he's good, but he's not that good, right? And whoops, not like I think that's part of the issue. I think Mayer locks you in. I mean, I think there's a lot of players in this class that have similar ceilings to really good tight ends in the NFL and fantasy right now. The Travis Kelce's, the George Kittles of the world, who were athletic. We're not like these super producer athletic players in college. You're like, wow, this guy's ceiling's so high. So I think you just got to watch that. You got to be careful about saying the ceiling's big. If Michael Mayer catches 85, 90 passes a year, guess what? In PPR, he's got the upside. That's all I need. I don't need Dalton Kincaid doing it. So I think Mayer has more upside to me in fantasy as well. And I think that's where you can get someone to miss the boat if they take Kincaid over him.
We talked about, you talked about Dalton Kincaid and the back issue. Luke Musgrave, another guy who's been ascending up draft boards here. Probably going to be he should be a day 2 pick. Really good chance of being a second round pick. Any concerns? Like, I guess I'll ask you about the injury with Musgrave. And then what else? Are there any other red flags that you worry about with Luke Musgrave? FFPC players who play in this Dynasty format with 1.5 per catch for tight ends want to be dialed in on these players. Try to dial them in on Luke Musgrave here, Shane.
Well, and I think the FFPC format and the tight end premium format is what makes it interesting because there's not a lot of information out there, like where to draft them in your rookie drafts.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to find. So I think Musgrave is an interesting case where I think he's getting kind of high second round buzz. I mean, there's even some first round potential late in that first round for him because he does have all those traits. We saw it at the Senior Bowl. We saw the athleticism this offseason. And the 2 games he played this year were phenomenal. It was like top 15 tight end player elite games. And so what do you do with that? I think with the knee injury, just the lack of experience, I mean, that's really all we got of really good games. Like I can't take 2 games and say, yep, this is the guy. I'm not comfortable enough to do that. But look, if the Packers draft him in round 2, I think it's going to be tough for fantasy players to completely bypass. I mean, I think he's worth the risk, as maybe the tight end 3 to me in fantasy when we talk about these rookie drafts.
It's funny. I think tight end is one of these positions where we're really emphasizing the height of these players, the speed of these players, the strength, like the athletic score is huge for a lot of these tight ends. But there seems to almost be a little bit of a cap to it because we've seen some of these like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" tight ends, and they haven't really seemed to pan out as well as we've hoped so far. Can Darnell Washington be the guy that changes that, or are we maybe overrating him?
I think we're overrating him a little bit, and not that he can't be a good tight end, a good fantasy tight end. I mean, he blocks like a right tackle. You can lock him in there. That lack of production at Georgia, they had Brock Bowers, who's I think he's going to be better than Kyle Pitts. I think he's going to be a top 3 rookie pick next year in FFPC. Like, what would you expect Darnell Washington to do production-wise catching the football? But I think we just see that size. We see the 98 percentile, almost 99 percentile athleticism because of his size and say, wow, this guy is a specimen, which he is. I don't know if that translates into fantasy points because if I'm a team and I draft Darnell Washington, I want him to block a lot. Like that's he's really good at it. Let's have him do that thing that he's really good at most. And maybe we get like Jelani Woods last year where you can catch a touchdown or have a multi-touchdown game. But I think that inconsistency, even if Darnell Washington goes round 1, I think he's going to end up 5th, 6th on my rookie rankings. I think he's not a fantasy really consideration for me unless he really falls.
Better Boss chiming in the YouTube chat right now. Guys, I'll tell you this right now. As a guy who follows the Packers, who cheers to the Packers, they suck in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. If you look at recent history, it's been terrible. The last great one, I think, you can't even really call great because his career was cut short due to injury, and you have to go all the way back 15 years to 2008 when they drafted Jermichael Finley out of Texas, a guy that was young for the NFL draft. Guy who came in, wasn't the greatest blocker, but could do a lot of stuff catching the football. I still remember that preseason after he had that kind of breakout season, and Aaron Rodgers and him were just playing pitch and catch in the preseason. I'm like, man, Finley is going to blow up this year. He had the neck injury, ended up being out of football. Better Boss wants to know, Shane, is there a Jermichael Finley in this year's draft class at tight end, given how deep it is, how athletic it is, and how good it is?
It's tough because Jermichael Finley didn't test like out of this world. Like no. I can't find a tight end in this class that tested like Jermichael Finley did because all the tight ends in this class are the 80, 90 percentile. I would say when we talk about like watching Jermichael Finley as an NFL player, I think Sam Laporta from Iowa is probably closer to that, right? A little bit undersized, but a really good body control to be able to go up and catch passes at different catch points all over the field. And he had terrible quarterback play and made it work. And I think that's interesting to me to get that athleticism like Finley had with the Packers, where you have the versatility. And Laporta tries to block, God bless him, but it's not really in his, it's not his wheelhouse. You can put a couple good highlights on there to hide it, but like he's trying and usually not, overly succeeding. I think Finley was that way too. I think Laporta is probably that player. I think he's a player that fantasy players are going to like maybe more than the NFL. So I'm interested to see where he lands third round and if it props him up rookie draft boards a bit.
Yeah, and when you talk about a guy like that who is skilled catching the football and getting out into his routes, sometimes I feel like the offensive coordinators, the head coach just tells me, all right, son, just get in his way. We need you out there to catch passes. You got to block. Just get in his way a little bit, and we'll see what happens. That's what coaches always used to say to me. Balkman, just get in his way. We'll worry. Everybody else will do their job. We'll be okay. But Sam Laporta, do you feel like you're a little bit higher on him than the rest of your peers as far as all the draft nicks out there? I feel like you might be a little bit high. Not saying you're wrong, because I like him too. Do you feel like you're a little bit higher than other people?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, it's an interesting kind of split for me because I'm in the fantasy community, but also the draft community,
right,
where I feel like the fantasy community is like super hyped for Sam Laporta, and like the draft community is like, yeah, he could fall to day 3, and it's like, well, that doesn't feel good. So I feel like I'm a little bit high on him. Maybe the fantasy influence is kind of bringing me in a little bit, where I'm taking those pass catchers a little bit higher. But I feel like there's going to be NFL GMs that like this guy, that like the toughness, like the Iowa tradition, just what they produce the tight end. I mean, I think that's huge. So I think he's my tight end 6, and I think that's it's about where he'll go.
Makes a lot of sense. You talked about GMs being high on a certain player. GMs were pretty high on Dallas Goedert, despite being the small school guy. There's another small school guy that is from, in fact, the same small school this year in Tucker Kraft. Are there any other comparisons from these two guys other than just they both went to the same school?
Look, I think there's some comparisons to when you look at kind of the small school transition. I'm a huge Tucker Kraft fan. I don't think you'll find anyone higher on him than me. He's my tight end 3 in this class. I think he's going to be a stud. So my comp article for Draft Countdown. Yeah, when I looked at my notes, what I go back in my tight end notes, and I that's how I do my comps, is as prospects. And Travis Kelce, man, his notes matched up perfectly with Tucker Kraft. It was, injuries kind of slowed him down, really good hands, good to find the hole in the zone, run you over, but doesn't look overly like fast or athletic. And I think it's similar. I think Tucker Kraft, his best football is ahead of him. Now, look, is he going to be Travis Kelce? Like no one from this class probably is. But, when I look at their profiles as coming into the NFL, I think it is very similar. He worked out super great, better than I even expected. I think if Dallas Goedert is what Tucker Kraft ends up being, I mean, you got to draft him. I think it's going to be 3rd, maybe even 4th round of some of these rookie drafts that'll be available. I think he goes 3rd to 4th round in the NFL draft, and I'm hoping the 3rd.
You are not the only Tucker Kraft fan out there, Shane. We have Dan Toomey. Now, is Dan Toomey going to join us at all tonight, Garrett?
He's not going to be on all tonight, but he is doing his own NFL draft live coverage for Dynasty Nerds. So he's doing that all night Thursday, all night Friday, and Dan knows his stuff. So I'm excited to see that.
All right, so he's obviously excited for Tucker Kraft. He says he's here for all the Tucker Kraft hype. Just Josh, Tucker Kraft equals Goddard. Wow, I love it. Sedated Fork also saying I like Tucker Kraft at the combine. Sedated Fork also wants to know, Shane, do you have any projected landing spots for these tight end spots? Because I know you do 7-round mocks, so I know you put this all together. Have any of these tight ends, when you've done these mocks, consistently landed in the same spot for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of working on my final mock draft here coming up. I think when we look Mayer, I'm really looking at Dallas as a nice spot. I know they're interested in him. I feel like he might go higher than that. So I'm having a little trouble placing him. I think if Kincaid falls far enough, I think Cincinnati at 28 brought him in and interviewed him at the combine. That seems like a good fit. Not sure if he'll be around either. Darnell Washington of the Lions are really interested round 2 if he falls further than we expect. I don't think they'll take him in the 1st round. But that's possible. Like I said, Musgrave and the Packers. Tucker Kraft in the 3rd. If the Cowboys don't get Michael Mayer, they've been interested in him. So I think there's a couple ties to these tight ends. When you look at the visits, you look at some of the meetings and the interest and the fits of the offense. Those are kind of the ones I've come up with.
Let's get to the relative athletic scores, which I always starting 3 years ago, I really started putting a lot of stock into this, not just at the tight end position, but all over. When I see how predictive it is for people to not only get drafted in the NFL, but stay in the NFL for more than a few years, it was eye opening to me. Zach Kuntz's RAS score and his insane athleticism. This guy coming out of Old Dominion, I believe. Is that going to translate to the NFL? I think you alluded to this before. We've seen really athletic tight ends get to the NFL. The athleticism doesn't necessarily translate to big fantasy output. Your thoughts on Kuntz, Shane Hallam?
I'm scared for him versus Zach Kuntz. Like, the athleticism is great, and I mean, when you look at Penn State, he was a Penn State transfer down to Old Dominion. Brenton Strange is in this class for them. They actually had an offer out to Kyle Pitts and rescinded it to keep Zach Kuntz to have him, come in. So they produce these athletic players and tight ends. Zach Kuntz just is not the player on the field that the RAS score indicates being the most athletic tight end of all time. I think he does look like that athlete on the field, but man, he needs a lot of work in terms of learning how to catch the football. He doesn't understand how to kind of extend his arms, catch with his hands, being able to do it in a fluid motion, looks kind of rigidy. If you go back to the combine and watch even the gauntlet drill, which isn't always the best thing, but I think you see some of that catch radius issues, so I think there's potential there. There's always potential there on the, he could work out, go to a great tight end coach who really coaches him up. And now you have this beast. I think he's going to go a lot lower in the NFL draft than the fantasy community thinks when they saw that score. I think we're looking more 5th, 6th round than the 3rd round where a lot of people have him.
Yeah, that's interesting because we do often associate athleticism and draft capital together, but those two things don't always go hand in hand, obviously. Who else have we not talked about? Because I know this is a deep class. There's a lot of names, a lot of guys. Is there somebody that you have your eye on? Maybe, one or both communities are down a little bit on this player, but you tend to like this guy, and we got to make sure that we hear about him.
Look, yeah, I think a guy you need to take a flyer on is Luke Schoonmaker, the tight end out of Michigan. I don't know why people are not talking about him more. I think he had the injury this past season. But he's a player that kind of does it all as well, is a really good blocker, but came out with the nice athleticism at the combine. I mean, he was in the 98th percentile as well, running a 4.63 at 6'5", 251 pounds. I mean, he could catch. He's like a smooth athlete in routes and movement. Michigan just doesn't know how to throw the ball much, and that's been their problem for a long time. So he didn't get used all that often. And I'm like, man, this guy is going to be a much better NFL player than he ever was in college. I actually think like Miami in round 3 would be a great fit for him, and they need that two-way tight end that fits that Shanahan offense. I think Schoonmaker could be a natural fit if they don't take one in the 2nd round, and I think fantasy players need to get on board with him.
All right, so let's play a little game here, Shane. We're going to play over-under here. If I set it at 4.5, are you taking the over or under for number of tight ends that are drafted in the first 2 rounds? Not first 2 days, first 2 rounds.
It's a good number because I think 4 are definitely in the first 2 rounds. I'm going to go over. I say we get one more in that 2nd round late, maybe a guy we don't expect. I think it's going to happen. Yeah.
Okay. So if I set it at 6.5 and I say the first 2 days of the draft, so rounds 1 through 3, over or under 6.5 tight ends that go in the first 3 rounds.
That's an easy over for me. I think it'll be 7. I think it'll be going to be 7 in the top 100 picks. I mean, I think it's going to be pretty insane, especially with some of these, the defensive line classes down, the safety classes down. That's where we're going to have more tight ends get in.
There is one other guy that I wanted to ask you about, Will Mallory. Not a guy that I've heard a ton on. I did see Nagy talking about him the other day. Some of his thoughts that he might be a better pass catcher, just that pass catcher, but better pass catcher than Michael Mayer is. Any thoughts on Mallory?
I like Mallory. He's someone that I always wished we got to see more of, that he got nicked up and got knocked out of games. He's on that smaller end. I mean, he's kind of that receiver playing tight end. So I mean, I think Jim Nagy's got to prop up his Senior Bowl guys, but it's fair. But I do think he's a good pass catcher. I think the problem is you're not getting any blocking out of him. I mean, this isn't even to Sam Laporta levels where you're like, yeah, you're giving a good effort and can do some things, some plays. So you're almost looking at kind of a very poor man's Mike Gesicki, where you got to line him up in the slot and let him catch the ball. Like, I think he's a good pass catcher. We've seen those type of players struggle to find their fit in the NFL. That's my worry with him. I think if he somehow can get that round 3 capital, then, hey, I'm interested. If a team's drafting him that high, then they're going to use him. I think when you start getting into day 3, now it's, hey, this guy's really good. Maybe we can figure out a way to use him. And usually that takes a little bit more time. So I'm interested, but cautious, if that makes sense.
It does. Absolutely, it does. And I want to make sure I heard you right before. Did you say Tucker Kraft is your number 3 tight ends this year, Shane?
Yeah, in my personal rankings, he's my number 3. He won't be the 3rd off the board, obviously, but it's the case.
So let me ask you this. So every single year, now we normally do this exercise with running backs more so, but when we go in, we're getting ready to consume the NFL draft. From a dynasty fantasy football standpoint, we're like, okay, what running back situation should I be watching for when this team's on the clock where they could draft one of these top 2 or 3 running backs and immediately not only get great dynasty value, but great redraft value as well. I think about the Atlanta Falcons this year. I know anytime they're going to be on the clock until they take a running back, people are going to be paying attention to them. What are the tight end situations that you are most following this year as far as when these teams are on the clock, they might be taking a tight end? And if they do, this could mean big things for dynasty players.
It's funny because I think any dynasty player knows that there's a lot of those situations because there's not enough damn tight ends to start in fantasy anymore. So, yeah, I mean, look, we're looking at Green Bay, Washington, Cincinnati, New Orleans, Dallas, Miami, Los Angeles, the LA Chargers. Like, I think there are a ton of situations that, like, you draft a tight end in the first 2 days, that's a guy that should get a lot of playing time. And I know as a fantasy owner, you can't rely on the rookie tight end. I think you're still not going to be able to do it here, but I think there's a lot of situations where they're going to benefit. I think the Raiders, the Arizona Cardinals, I think there's just a ton of those situations where a tight end could step in and at least be a 1B type right off the bat as a rookie. And that doesn't happen often.
This could be a landmark year for dynasty fantasy football players and tight ends, given all the supply out there and all the demand. You can see it. We could look back on 2023 and say, wow, this was really the year that the tight end landscape got set. We shall see. Shane, in order to follow up with you, for anybody else who wants to consume more Shane Hallam dynasty content, tell us what's going on with Draft Countdown, Devy Marketplace, Dynasty League Football, everything that you're doing right now.
You can check out draftcountdown.com. I'll have my final rankings here next week of a 7-round mock draft. And then the Monday after the draft, I'll have a 7-round 2024 mock draft. If you want to get ready for next year, we're just kind of finalize those rankings and they're going to be ready to go. And by the end of May, I'll have a 2025 and a 2026 mock draft. So we'll have everything that you need. But subscribe to the Draft Countdown podcast, subscribe to the Devy Marketplace podcast. And we'll also be live streaming all 3 days of the draft. So on Saturday, if you want to actually get updates on the picks instead of still talking about the first round picks, we'll have live scouting reports. I'll break down every player. For last year's NFL draft, I had watched every single player except one. This year, I guarantee I will have watched every player that gets drafted. So we're making.
Shane, I just got to say this real quick. I'm a guy that gets paid to do fantasy football stuff, and I would struggle to do a 7-round rookie mock. That's only 12 picks per round. You're doing next year's NFL. That's 32 picks per round, not even to mention the compensatory picks. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
Like I always say, like, I don't have the background, the training, but I can outwork anyone, and I'll certainly do it.
A guy who is going to have a 2025 mock draft out here shortly. You are a sick man.
It's true. It is true.
We love every minute of it. We cannot wait to consume more of your content. DraftCountdown.com, at Shane P. Hallam on Twitter. We'll continue to follow you there. Thanks so much for enlightening us on the tight ends this year, man. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks, guys, for having me. Let me go on. Appreciate you both so much.
Shane P. Hallam, ladies and gentlemen, from Draft Countdown, the Devy Marketplace, and Dynasty League Football. And with that, we are done with our sort of positional previews. Garret, you are running the show. I'm going to slip over to the navigation section of the vehicle that we are leading tonight, as we have reached halfway in our big NFL draft extravaganza. Tell us what's on tap here for the next couple hours. I'm very excited for it.
This is going to be an absolute, I mean, first of all, let's just say this has been super fun getting to talk about all these positions, talk about all these guys. Absolute blast. But the good times are going to continue to go, folks. We are moving on to at least 2 rounds. We might even try to sneak in a 3rd round of an NFL mock. And then what we're going to do, we're going to look at the positions that we took those fantasy players in, the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends. And then we're going to do a fantasy mock draft off of those landing spots. We're going to have Britt Flinn coming in. She's going to talk about some of her mock drafts that she's done. She's going to help us make these picks. And then Rich Dotson is going to come in for the rookie portion of the draft. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Can't wait. We'll be doing this together for another 2 hours, my man.
I can't wait for it. Garret Price from Dynasty Nerds, Rich Dotson from Dynasty Nerds coming up, Britt Flinn coming up as well. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. We continue on with Dynasty Nerds, 2 more full hours of NFL draft coverage. I talked about Shane Hallam being a sick person. You are a sick person for watching this, and we're loving that you're hanging out with us tonight, because we're just pigs in the slop, man. This is great stuff. It all continues right here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Dynasty Nerds coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Moose and Keith, weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Calvin Ridley yesterday, he applied for reinstatement from the National Football League.
Ridley, Kirk, Zay Jones, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence. That is crazy potent on offense.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I mean, Ridley's great.
I think Trevor Lawrence is a guy I want in fantasy this year.
I think you're probably right. I think they're just going to get better and better. First off, Peterson's a wonderful offensive mind, a great head coach, and we've seen that and saw that this year as Jacksonville made it to the postseason. And Trevor Lawrence, anybody that questioned whether or not he could play in the National Football League or just how good he was going to be in the NFL, those questions were answered this past season as in the second half of the year. Statistically speaking, he was a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. That's how good Trevor Lawrence is. You throw Calvin Ridley into the mix, he's going to be great. Yeah, I think Lawrence is a guy you want. I think Ridley's a guy you want. Clearly, Travis Etienne is going to be one of those early, first-round selections as well, being the dual-threat running back that he is, not only running, but also catching the ball out of the backfield, Keith, and the ability to take something small and take it to the house. Take a 5-yard dump pass, make a guy miss in the open field, and he's gone. I mean, you saw that with Travis Etienne this past season for Jacksonville. Yeah, sky's the limit. I mean, I think you're going to go from a team in the year span where you wanted no part of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you're looking at fantasy football to where you want as many Jaguars as you possibly can, because they're going to be really, really productive. And let's see if they get their tight end back as well, who had
Evan Ingram was great.
And Evan Ingram, who was great this past season.
Yeah. I mean, if they keep that whole core together, their offense is going to be one of the best in football. Like, I legitimately think that they could be one of the best offenses in football.
Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, then
and Ridley,
Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, a good offensive line, and you've got Doug Peterson being creative calling.
Right?
And you look at that division. The Colts are a mess.
Yep.
Titans
look like they're on the downslide.
Titans are on the downslide, right? That window is clearly closed. And then you got the Houston Texans.
Years away from relevancy.
Yeah.
I mean, Jacksonville could win 11 games next year.
Moose and Keith, weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Oh boy, we are back. Oh, it's been a joy. It has been a joy. 2 hours already. We have the mega show, FFPC Dynasty Nerds, coming together, and we have a very special guest to help us make sure that we are doing everything right in this NFL mock draft. Britt Flinn. You can find her at Britt Flinn at Britt_Flinn. I gotta make sure I get that right. I apologize. at Britt_Flinn on Twitter. How you doing tonight?
I'm so good. Thank you guys for having me. This is exciting times.
Oh, it is great times right before the draft. Love this time. We were talking quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends before this. And the three of us together, we're going to put our minds together in this time. And we are going to look at the NFL draft board and we're going to decide, are these guys going with one of these fantasy relevant positions? If so, we need to talk about it a little bit. If not, we'll give them a little something, Jalen Carter here, Will Anderson there, and then we'll move on. Does that sound good to you guys?
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm down.
Cool. All right, well, let's get that mock draft board up because I know we've got a lot to cover. We in theory think we're going 3 rounds, Britt. I don't know that that's happening. But that's what Eric and I talked. At least I talked Eric into it. I still don't know if he believes me that we can do it or not. But we're
gonna try. We're gonna give it a try. I mean, there's no shame in trying.
And there are so many possibilities. Like
there
you
are.
Can't, that's the best thing about mocks. You're not going to be, I guess, taken down a notch if you're wrong on these mock drafts picks.
Yeah, no one ever gets it 100% correct, right?
And that's the fun of it. You just kind of get to play your wish list and just play around with stuff. So,
absolutely. Well, we are going to kick things off right away with the number 1 overall pick. Eric, we'll start with you here. I know that there have been a lot of talk about CJ Stroud leading up to it, but the past week or so, it's really shifted over to Bryce Young. We thinking Bryce Young at 101 here?
I think it would be irresponsible for me to say anything else. And I know we'll get off the rails here. I don't want to get off the rails at 101. Like, let's just keep the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid. I'm going to say Bryce Young to the Carolina Panthers here. I think, what's interesting about this is we talked about how, from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, we want to swing for the fences. We want to take, home run swings so that when we do hit, man, it is a massive hit. I think Carolina has kind of let us know that that's what they want to do. They've already given up all this capital in DJ Moore to get the number 1 pick. I don't think there's anything that would stop them from, not worrying about Bryce Young's size. We talked about his running ability earlier, Garrett. I don't think there's anything stopping them from not only making the move to get up to number 1, but then taking that home run pick here. I think Bryce Young's the home run pick, and I think that's what they do.
I think you're absolutely right, Britt. Any thoughts? Anything that we're not seeing here?
Yeah, I think you guys smashed the nail on the head, especially when you look at the Vegas odds. At one point, after Young canceled the rest of his meetings with the rest of the teams, the odds went up to -2,000. So I don't think that there's any other chance. BetMGM pulled those odds, so you can't even bet on the number 1 overall pick. I think that that's a lock.
Done and done. Let's put Bryce Young at 1. I gave Garrett or Eric the slightly easier one, but Britt, I'm going to give you the hard one here because there's a lot of controversy over what the Houston Texans do at 2. Are you going to give them a quarterback or are you going to give them a defensive player here?
No, I'm going defensive player. I think that the GM of the Texans are not necessarily sold on any of the 3 top remaining quarterbacks. And the odds kind of favor that. On Tuesday, Will Anderson jumped up to +125 as the favorite to go number 2 overall. So I think that they take Will Anderson here and kind of shore up that edge rush.
And that would really blow things up from what we were considering a few weeks ago, because we were looking at potentially 4 quarterbacks as the first 4 picks off the board, right?
Absolutely. And trust me, I've gone back and forth and rearranged my board and done all this. And I'm like, when Will Anderson took the lead, it really kind of shook up the entire process. So it's going to be interesting.
Eric, if you were their GM, is that what you would do? Would you take a defensive player here and maybe punt for next year and get another Davis Mills year in there? Or would you go after Stroud or Richardson or one of those guys?
All right. So the Texans are in the unique position here of not necessarily caring about what their fan base wants or caring about being good this year. Because if they stink again this year, no big deal, right? They just go to the top or near the top of the draft board next year, and they have a great shot at either Drake May or Caleb Williams, which to me represents a higher ceiling than Stroud. Absolutely. For sure. I don't know if they're sold on Richardson. I also don't know if they can afford to take Richardson. with the second overall pick, and Will Levis for that matter too. I don't know if you can afford to take the second overall pick on those players. So I'm sort of with Britt on this one. I think I would go Will Anderson, although, man, there might be some smart GMs out there that were in charge of the Texans. They'd be taking the quarterback there. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Makes sense there. So let's go on to number 3. We're going to have Will Anderson go at 2. We're not going to do any trades in this one because I think it's just going to take us way too long. So let's assume that the Arizona Cardinals stay at 3. I know that there's a high likelihood they move that, but you never know what they could do. At 3, we don't necessarily expect him to take a quarterback. I think it's probably too high for any other positions offensively. What do you guys think? Britt, what do you think here?
I think that they're going to go with Tyree Wilson. You know, they lost J.J. Watt to retirement. They lost another edge rusher last season. Their pass rush was not great last year. And they've, like you said, I don't think that they take a quarterback because they've already paid Kyler Murray all that money, and they can't afford to take somebody with that much capital. So, yeah, I think they go edge rush here with Wilson.
All right, well, then let's move on to number 4, the Indianapolis Colts. And I think if this situation plays out, the Colts are thrilled because for a minute there, it looked like they were going to have to settle for QB4 or try to figure out some retread quarterback to get back on their team. And now they might get the second best quarterback in this draft. Eric, who do you think they would take if they had that opportunity?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, and I'm going to go a little bit outside the box here, but I'm going to connect. I can't remember if it was Daniel Jeremiah or who reported it. It was a reputable source saying that there's been some connections to Will Levis to Indianapolis here. Now, I think that if I was Jim Irsay, I'd be telling my GM, hey, listen, man, we got to get Stroud here. But I'm going to say that they take Levis here. So we're going to let CJ Stroud slip. And we're going to get Will Levis going to the Indianapolis Colts here with the 4th overall pick. And already we're getting fireworks, right?
Yeah, that's spicy.
Absolutely. Britt, what do you think about that?
I don't necessarily agree with Levis. I think that Levis has a bunch of problems, or not problems necessarily, but a lot more development. He's not that day one starter to me. And honestly, I would put Richardson over Levis because of Shane Steichen's love of the RPO. But, you know, again, it's a mock. So who knows? Anybody can go at any given time. So I love it. Let's get spicy.
There we go. Will Levis now off the board as the 4th player. We now have the Seattle Seahawks. Now, I don't want to rule out the Seattle Seahawks from taking a quarterback potentially here, but even more likely later on with their second first-round picker in the second round, because they did just sign Geno Smith, but I don't know that anyone's convinced that they love Geno, but I think that he's done enough. Is there any chance that they swing for the fences here at 5 and go Richardson, or is that just too spicy? What do you think, Brett?
I think that's probably a little too spicy, especially with Jalen Carter sitting out there. He was the number 1 prospect before all his legal issues happened. Seattle definitely had problems stopping the run. I think that there are enough late round quarterbacks or mid round quarterbacks that they can wait on one of these top guys and go ahead and go with a defensive player in Carter.
I think Carter makes a lot of sense. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I have no quarrel with that at all. I think that this would definitely help out Seattle here. They have something in Geno Smith, and I think they're content to see what they can do with a guy like Carter on this team and still with Geno Smith on this contract that he just signed. If it blows up, maybe they get a chance at a pretty good quarterback next year. But yeah, I'm on board with Carter here for sure.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's have Carter going there at pick number 5. Now we have Detroit on the board, another team that hypothetically could take a quarterback, but I don't think we believe that that's very likely. They've said a lot of good things about Jared Goff. It's a team trending in a good direction. But Eric, I'm going to let you make the call here, my man. Do you think that they could go rogue, or do they go defensive player, or maybe do we even see the first offensive player, maybe offensive line, but the offensive player off the board here for fantasy football purposes?
You know, I've heard some Bijan Robinson stuff here for Detroit, even with their second pick, too, if Robinson is going to fall. I think they're pretty much set with the exclusion of tight end on their offense. I don't think that they take an offensive player. They had an historically bad defense last year. for the majority of the season. I think they shore that up. They just traded Jeff Okudah to Atlanta. So I'm going to say they take a defender here, and I'm going to say it's Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois. That's who Detroit takes here to try to shore up that defense. So Witherspoon to the Lions here is what I would say.
I think that's a good pick. What do you think about that, Britt?
I love it. I think that Brian Duker really took over and made some massive improvements. And now that he's full on the defensive back coach and not just an interim, he's going to bring in some really hardcore players. And I think that you're right. They're not going to need anybody on offense. So Witherspoon fits in perfectly here.
There we go. Let's make it done and done. Witherspoon to Detroit. Now we have the Raiders. The Raiders could make this draft really interesting. They did just sign Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason. We're starting to see more New England guys, former New England guys there with McDaniels. But does that mean Jimmy G is for sure the future here? Britt, I'm going to let you make the call. Do they take a quarterback, or are they just going to go with another position since they got their boy Jimmy GQ?
I think they're probably going to take a quarterback. In my mock draft on Fantasy Alarm, I had them taking Richardson and had Levis falling. But with Stroud still sitting out there, you can't leave him there. You've got to take him.
I love it. I love it. What do you think, Eric?
Totally on board. That's even before Britt said anything. Number one, I think CJ Stroud is going to be a better quarterback than Will Levis. And number two, I think the Raiders are just thrilled that they get Stroud to fall all the way here now to pick 7 of this draft. They're loving life. They have their bridge quarterback in Garoppolo. Now they have their quarterback in the future in Stroud.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic pick. Love it for them. Love it for that organization. And I'm sure Al Davis is smiling somewhere on them finally getting their franchise guy in CJ Stroud. So that takes us to Atlanta. Atlanta might be a little disappointed there. We know that they're another team that could be in the sweepstakes for a quarterback, but there's some good quarterbacks still out there. One in particular, Eric, any thoughts on that guy going to Atlanta, or are we going to let him keep going?
I thought about it. But I am going to go with, and this is, I said this before when we were talking with Theo Gremminger about this. All eyes are going to be on the Atlanta situation as far as the running back goes. You know that they want to run the football there. They probably don't have the horses in the backfield right now. Algiers fine, but I think to get a premium player like Bijan Robinson here, I think they skip quarterback. Now, here's the thing. I think that they think more of Desmond Ridder than the rest of us. I think he's okay at best. I don't think that he'd be the right choice here. If I was, I don't think that Ridder would be the right choice for quarterback going forward with Atlanta. So I would say if I was the GM, I would take Richardson if he fell there. You know, they obviously saw what a great dynamic quarterback can do with Michael Vick. I think they say Bijan Robinson too good to pass up. Bijan Robinson to the Atlanta Falcons here.
Ooh, so Bijan Robinson getting that top 10 draft capital. And look, we know Arthur Smith has been looking for that running back since he spent his time in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. The two of those were a match made in heaven, but he gets his guy and then some in Bijan Robinson. Britt, for fantasy football, how exciting would that be?
It would be so exciting if you were able to grab Bijan. Now, if you are like me and have a ton of Algier shares, that would be super disappointing. But yeah, I think that Bijan would thrive really well in that Atlanta offense, and it would take some of that pressure off Ridder. We know how Arthur Smith loves to run the football, ground and pound situation, and Bijan would just fit in perfectly there.
Absolutely. All right, Bijan Robinson, pick 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. This thing is already so spicy. I'm loving this mock draft. This is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. All right. Chicago traded back here to the number 9 spot. There's some rumors that they could maybe rekindle an old flame here with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Justin Fields. But there's a lot of people saying, man, they have so many other holes, particularly that offensive line. There's some needs on defense. Brett, I'll give you this one. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I think they have to go offensive line here. And I love a good hometown reunion story. So I really think that they go with Peter Skoronski here. They got rid of David Montgomery, who was really great in blocking. Khalil Herbert's not that great. D'Onta Foreman's old. I think that Skoronski is the logical pick here if you want Fields to go forward as your franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's the odds-on favorite pick that I've seen, and I think it makes a lot of sense for their franchise. Eric, any protests to that? Or are you cool with it?
Yeah, I mean, as a Packers fan, Peter's grandfather, Bob Skoronski, was on some of the legendary Vince Lombardi teams of the 1960s. So I would have loved if he would have fell to my Green Bay Packers here. Totally don't think he will. I think this is a great pick for the Bears. I think this sets their offensive lineup really well in protecting Justin Fields.
Absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense. So we get to the last pick of the first round now. And this is the Super Bowl almost champs. They lost to the Chiefs in a very closely contested game, but they have multiple first-round picks here. And this was a favorite of mock drafts for Bijan Robinson for a while, number 10 to the Eagles. But they did, they signed Rashad Penny. They have Kenneth Gainwell. So they have other options there. So what do we think happens here now, Eric? They could take some offensive players, but there's a lot of good defensive guys still available here. What do you think they do?
They lost so much in free agency on defense, and Jalen Hurts in that offense, they're going to be cooking along. I don't think they necessarily think that they need to take an offensive difference maker here. So I'm going to give him a guy who actually wasn't starting for his own collegiate team this past year, and that's Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. He gives them that burst, that pass rushing burst off the edge. You can never have enough pass rushers in the NFL. The Eagles are going to load up here. I think Lucas Van Ness is my pick here for Philadelphia.
Yeah, I really like that. You like that pick, Britt?
I love that. I had him in both of my mock drafts going to Philly, and their defensive line is aging a little bit, and Van Ness gives them a little bit more depth. And I think that as he develops throughout the next several seasons, he's going to be really good.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's put Van Ness there at number 10 to the Eagles. We get to another potentially quarterback needy team, and there is a quarterback still sitting out there. Yeah. Britt, do you want to make that match, or are there other ways that these Tennessee Titans are going to go?
I think you have to go with a receiver here. Like, you look at who they have on their depth chart. You've got Treylon Burks, who was okay when he played last season, but he got hurt a lot. And then you've got Chris Moore and Nick Westbrook-Ikini. Like, those guys are not starters. So I think you have to go with Jackson Smith and Jigba here. He's going to open up that field. Tannehill is still a little serviceable, so maybe you can take one in a mid-round or next year. Yeah, you've got to go receiver.
So which receiver are you going to go with?
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I thought you said that, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't Zay Flowers, wasn't Quentin Johnston. Would you take JSN there as well, Eric?
Yeah, I have no problem with Tennessee taking a playmaker like JSN there. I mean, they have a Okonkwo, who I like. Derrick Henry, I don't know how much longer they can keep riding that train. I did not like Treylon Burks last year, but I've warmed up to him. So to get a guy like Smith and Jigba, who I think is a complementary receiver to what Treylon Burks does so well, I think this makes a lot of sense.
I agree. Let's make that happen. So now we get to the Houston Texans at pick 12. They just went defense. So guys like Miles Murphy and Nolan Smith and, some of these defensive backs that are still available, I wouldn't think that they would double up on defensive players here, but maybe they do. Eric, what do you think the Houston Texans do here?
I think the fact that they got Will Anderson with the second pick of the draft, and the fact that there's still a quarterback out there that a lot of people that probably should have gone at 4, that a lot of people would love to see him to go to a situation where he could thrive in. I think Richardson is the perfect pick here for the Texans. Ooh. You get the difference maker at 2 on defense, and then you get Richardson, who has a super high upside as far as what he could be in the NFL. For him to fall this late to 12, I think it's a home run draft for the Texans if they get Anderson and Richardson.
Eric, if he's the pick here for the Texans at 12, where does he rank in your quarterback rankings in Superflex?
For Superflex, I would probably put him 2 behind Young. I mean, I like him better than Stroud. I like him better than Levis for sure, better than Hooker, better than Tanner McKee, obviously. I think I think you said this in the first hour tonight. They're all starting to blur together now at this point.
Yeah.
But I think if you want to take Anthony Richardson as your first quarterback and you have him ahead of Bryce Young, no quarrel with that. You do you. I think that's a fine pick. For me, he's my second quarterback.
There we go. Britt, anything that you want to protest on this?
No, I like Richardson for fantasy. The only thing that I will caution dynasty managers about is that if his passing inconsistency keeps up, he might only be good in dynasty for a couple of years
Sure.
with his legs.
risk.
And then obviously, if he's not passing well, then he's going to get benched. He's going to get replaced. So just a little cautionary tidbit there on Richardson for your dynasty rosters.
Absolutely. All right. Well, then let's move on to the New York Jets. And we thought by this point we would have their quarterback situation figured out. We do not. They do not have Aaron Rodgers at this point. It is still believed that he is probably going there. But at this point, who knows what could happen? Maybe the NFL draft and who's on the board at certain times will offer a little bit of clarity to the situation, and we finally get something done. But at this point, we're at pick 13, Britt. Do you go defense? Do you go offense? Where are you leaning here for the New York Jets?
I think you're going to have to go with somebody on the offensive line, because if Rodgers is coming in, which we believe that he will be, you're going to have to protect him. He's an older quarterback. He can't scramble. He can't move out of the pocket when he's under pressure. And Mekhi Becton has struggled with injury. So you really need somebody to back him up. And I think that that's why they take Paris Johnson here, just to get some security on their offensive line and protect Rodgers once they finally bring him in.
I think Paris Johnson's a great pick. There are definitely other offensive linemen still available, and guys like Broderick Jones and Wright, and there's some good other offensive linemen, but I think Paris Johnson's the right pick there for the Jets as well. Eric, you cool with that?
100%. If Paris Johnson was available here for the Jets at 13, they'd be running up the card. He should go higher than this. He did it tonight. The Jets would love any team who drafts Paris Johnson. I think is going to love him.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So that puts us at 14, Eric. And the New England Patriots are always a bit of a wild card. Their draft board never looks like what we think it's going to look like. They take guys that we've never heard of in the second round, and they do what they want. They don't always have the best first round hit rate, but they seem to find guys later that are amazing. So it's really impressive how they make things work out here. But all of that being said, trying to read Bill Belichick's mind here, what happens at pick 14? Because I don't even know what to advise the range here. So it's all on you, no pressure.
It's a fool's errand trying to get inside Bill Belichick's mind, right? No, I think they have not had a lot of success in the first round drafting perimeter receivers. That said, I think they go with a receiver here. And I think it's Zay Flowers. I think they take Zay Flowers here, a guy that, they desperately need playmakers on this offense. Mac Jones needs help, or whoever the quarterback's going to be in 2024. Zay Flowers is still out here. I saw some headline, and I can't remember who wrote it, so my apologies, but it was like Zay Flowers makes so much sense to New England that it would never happen. I'm going to say it happens. I'm going to say Zay Flowers goes to the Patriots here at 14.
Britt, what do you think about this pick?
I think that's kind of, who knows? You're right. What is Bill Belichick going to do? I think it's a little high for him, especially since they brought in Juju, and with their quarterback situation with Mac Jones, are they going to trade him? What are they going to do with that? But they can definitely use some more playmakers. So yeah, I don't hate it.
All right. Zay Flowers going at pick 14, my number 2 wide receiver. Also the number 2 wide receiver going in our mock draft. Now, normally we've been going back and forth, Britt. I'm going to let you go 2 in a row after this, but I'm going to let Eric have this one because he's a Packers fan. So I feel like he should get to make this pick. I'll compensate you the missed picks later, I promise. But Eric, I'm going to let you put on your GM hat, take your guy for your team. Who are you taking at pick 15?
All right, so this is an exercise I did for one of my other shows, and we tried to figure out who the Packers are going to pick at 15. we looked at how there were 17 players invited to Kansas City for the NFL draft. Packers are picking at 15. We try to use process of elimination. Well, they never take a receiver in the first round. Receivers are out. Right. They're not going to take a quarterback. They have Rodgers and Love. They'll at least have Love. So they're not going to take a quarterback. And we went through who they've already met with. We went through, the meetings that they've had. We narrowed it down to 3 players. Now, those 3 players, there's one of them that's already been chosen. It's Paris Johnson. The other one is Keon White. That I thought would make a lot of sense here for Green Bay to get that outside pass rusher. I think they're going to go with a guy that literally nobody's talking about going to Green Bay. It's a player at a strength on their defense at cornerback, a guy they probably shouldn't take, but it does make their cornerbacks and their defensive backs stronger. They haven't met with this guy. I don't think they have any interest in him, but this is what we decided, that Joey Porter Jr. is going to be a Green Bay Packer. So the Packers take Joey Porter Jr. here to go with Eric Stokes, Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas. They need a safety. They need edge rusher. They need tight end. What do? Brian Gutekunst shocks us again. Cornerback, Joey Porter Jr.
I thought you were going to say Gonzalez there, but I like the Joey P pick. Great corner from Penn State. Britt, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of messed up my next 2 picks because I had him go into the Steelers, but
sorry,
that's what the draft is all about. You've got to be prepared. I think that's great. I probably would have gone receiver, but you're right. If you look at who's invited to the draft, it kind of makes sense.
It does. I think it makes sense. It would be interesting to see him take another defensive back in the first round. I feel like I see them doing that so much, but you never know. History does tend to repeat itself. All right. So, Britt, you're getting the next 2 now. All right. And we're going to start with the Washington Commanders here. This has been a popular landing spot for one of, if not the first tight end off the board in a lot of mocks. Is that a route you're considering going here or no?
As much as I want to, I don't think that I can, because if the Commanders are really running with Sam Howell, they're going to have to protect him. Their offensive line last season ranked near the bottom in both run blocking and pass protection. You've got an inexperienced quarterback who you've got to keep upright. So I think that they actually go tackle here and go with Broderick Jones.
Broderick Jones. I think that's a good pick. I think it makes a lot of sense. A team that does need to really protect their guy. And look, whether it's Howell or Brissett, either way, they got to get that passing attack going. They've got the young dynamic receivers to be able to make plays, but they got to have enough time to get the ball down the field to them. Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I said with edge rushers, you can't have enough good offensive linemen. If you go with a big, athletic, strong offensive tackle, that could be an offensive tackle, left tackle for the future for Washington, why not? I think it makes a lot of sense for them. I think it's a strong pick, not only for 2023, but if he does hit, this is a guy who's going to play on this team for many, many, many years.
All right, so I said we were going to get 3 rounds of an NFL draft in. We're a half hour into roughly an hour segment, and we've made it through halfway through the first round. So we'll see if that actually happens. But, I like to dream big, folks. Maybe we can do some speed rounds at the end after the first round. We can speed through the next couple. But let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Britt, you get another selection here. Who are you taking with the 17th pick in the draft?
Well, as much as I wanted Joey Porter Jr., he's gone. So I'm going to go with
such a good fit, right?
It would have been like the storylines alone would have just blown my mind. But I think they're going to go with the arguably better corner on the board and go with Christian Gonzalez. They got Patrick Peterson, but he's, on the aging end of things. Akilla Weatherspoon is fine, but they definitely need some depth in their secondary, and I think they go for it here with Gonzalez.
I think that's a fantastic pick. I have not seen many mocks recently where he is not in the top 10. So for him to be falling this far, I think Pittsburgh would be very happy to get him. And he's got good size at 6'1". So, I mean, he's a long corner. So that's something that's pretty exciting for them. Eric, what do you think about that pick for Pittsburgh?
Yeah, no question. I mean, Christian Gonzalez, I think when we actually do this for real, not us, but when we see it done for real, I think there's a really good chance that he goes top 10. Pittsburgh, yeah, Porter probably would have been much more of a fun pick there, but I think they got to be loving life with Christian Gonzalez falling all the way to 17 for them. He immediately helps their secondary and could be a shutdown corner for them.
Absolutely. Well, we'll put you back on the clock here, Eric, with the 18th pick in the draft. The Lions get their second pick of the draft. You mentioned Bijan would have been a great spot if it was available. I'm assuming you're not taking any other running backs because Gibbs and Swift, they wouldn't go super great together. It doesn't make a lot of sense for them. They do have a lot of needs still on that defense. Do you think they double up on the defensive player, or do we see the first tight end off the board here?
No, I think tight end would make some sense here for him, but I just think that defense was so historically bad last year. You need to attack that position again, and I think they get some help on that defensive line to stop the run, maybe get after the quarterback a little bit. So I'm going to go with, out of Pittsburgh, Kalijah Kancey as a defensive tackle to join that Lions defensive line there. I think he offers some pass rush chops, but I know he's going to clog up the run for teams trying to do that against the Lions. So I think to come away with Witherspoon and Kancey, this defense is a lot better than what it was at the start of the NFL draft.
Absolutely. Cool with that, Britt?
Yeah, I love that. I think that, like we mentioned earlier with the first Lions pick, that they're pretty well set on offense, and all they need is a few tweaks to their defense to really be ankle or kneecap breakers, whatever Dan Campbell says. And I think that Kalijah Kancey is the guy. Yeah, ankle biters are Chihuahuas. Kneecap biters, whatever.
Kneecap biters.
Ankle biters are Chihuahuas. Kneecap biters are Lions. That's how it works.
There we go. I think Kalijah Kancey is the perfect piece to get them to that next level. So I love this pick.
There we go. Perfect. All right, Brett. Well, you're back on the clock. Pick 19, Tampa Bay. What are you thinking there?
Man, Tampa Bay has so many pieces that they need to fill in. You know, they lost some receivers. They lost some tight ends. They obviously lost Tom Brady. So where are you going to go? I'm going to go a different route and go with safety Brian Branch here, because Tampa Bay had so many injuries in their secondary last season. Their secondary is getting a little bit older. They had just inconsistencies all the way around. Branch is versatile enough that he can play safety. He can play corner. He's just great in all aspects of the game. And I think he's the most multi-purpose player on the board at this position right now. So I think they take him.
I think Branch is a really good pick. We've known for a while now there's some players requesting trades, and guys are getting older, but that front seven was really good for a while for the Buccaneers. But the secondary was always a big concern. So I think that's a good pick. You cool with that one, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, Brian Branch is a guy I was actually excited about. I know Dan Edwards is chiming in on the YouTube chat right now. He liked Brian Branch going to the Packers here, and I think there was a lot of smoke with him going to the Packers. The difference, and the reason I don't think they do, well, number one, I already had him taking Joey Porter Jr. But number two, Brian Branch, if you look at Brian Gutekunst historically in the first two rounds of the draft, he goes for these hyper athletic guys, the stuff that you can't coach. And Brian Branch's relative athletic score wasn't necessarily all that great. Now, he is a great football player, and I have no doubt his instincts are going to carry him. He's going to have a productive NFL career. So for Tampa, I think this is a really good pick for them. It certainly helps him out. He's a ball hawk. He can make plays as well. He's just a great football player and the type of guy you want to take in the middle of the first round.
Absolutely. All right, Eric, we mentioned earlier that there's a chance that Seattle could take a quarterback here, and Hooker could be a fit that would make sense with Seattle. Is there enough there that you would maybe want to make that kind of pick, or are we going elsewhere for the Seattle Seahawks?
I think if you were at the 6th spot and you had the opportunity to take either Stroud or Richardson, again, for this exercise, and you pass on both, I think that you do not take Hooker here. Now, I do believe that with Jalen Carter going there, they feel like they've shored up that defense a little bit. Now they get Geno Smith another weapon here. Tyler Lockett has been hurt over the course of his career. He's not the youngest guy in the world anymore. I know they're paying him a lot of money, but don't you want a guy to pair with DK Metcalf in the future? I think they do. And I think Jordan Addison is a good guy to go with here. So I think Seattle takes Jordan Addison here. Great 3 wide receiver set with him, Lockett, and Metcalf. And then when Lockett does fall off, whenever his talent drops off or he moves on or anything like that, and you have an outside threat of Metcalf on one side, Addison on the other side, that's going to be tough to defend. So I got the Seahawks taking Jordan Addison here.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as a possibility. We talked about it earlier. I'm a little bit lower on this receiver class than other people are. So for me, if I'm a GM, like I'm not taking another receiver in the first round, but I could see teams that really like a guy like Addison, really smart player, really safe player. What about you, Britt?
Yeah, I think that Addison did well, and you don't win the Biletnikoff Award if you're not a good receiver. But his numbers were down last year. That being said, Tyler Lockett is getting older. DK Metcalf has suffered a few just little tiny injuries. Seattle's never had a solid number 3. And so I think Addison is a logical fit here.
All right, Britt, if I'm picking at 21, strictly for a fantasy football heart and desire, I want Dalton Kincaid to go to the Chargers here so bad. Are you going to crush my dreams with this pick?
I am going to crush it because I have selfish motivations to go at another pick. But I think that, man, this is really throwing everything off. I think that the Chargers were so bad in run stopping last season that they're going to have to do defense again. So I'm going to go with Brian Breezy from Clemson. Really shore up that interior. They've got Bosa on the edge. So while I could see Nolan Smith going, I think that they really need somebody on the interior, and that's what Breezy gives for him here.
Yeah, as much as it hurts my heart, it makes sense. Eric, how do you feel
mean you don't like
it?
Trey McKitty? You're not sold on McKitty?
Donald Parham?
Right.
No, I'm not sold. All right, Eric. What do you want to do with Baltimore here? Because this was another spot that if a wide receiver was going to go in the first round, this is another place where I could see it happening. Do you think that the Baltimore Ravens decide to do that? Do they kind of go rogue with not knowing what's going on with Lamar yet? Like what's happening here at the 22nd pick?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. So I think if you would have asked me this before they gave Odell Beckham all this guaranteed money, I would have said, okay, it's going to be a receiver here. Now I'm going to pull back on that a little bit. Baltimore it seems like over the years has been really famous for these big time playmakers on defense. I don't necessarily think that Deonte Banks is a big time playmaker at corner, but I do know he is definitely a first round grade. And I do know that Baltimore has taken these first round defenders and turned them into really, really good players for them. So I think this could be a best player available. I know we still have Miles Murphy out there, and I could see that pick being the play for the Ravens here. I'm going to go with Deonte Banks. This is a tough one for me, but I think I'm going to take the corner out of Maryland and go with Deonte Banks.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that being a real possibility there. Britt, you think that would happen?
Yeah, Baltimore is another one of those teams that their secondary just has been really banged up over the past few years, and they do have age concerns. So Banks still being out there, perfect fit.
Yeah, well, we're definitely not getting our first tight end off the board here. They just traded for TJ Hawkinson last season. So we still don't have the number one guy off the board. So who are you taking here, Britt?
I think Quentin Johnston finally goes off the board here. The Vikings got rid of Adam Thielen in free agency. KJ Osborne's likely going to slide into that slot receiver role. Quentin Johnston is perfect on the outside to complement Justin Jefferson with that big 6'4" frame and just huge ability to obliterate corners.
He definitely has that side speed combination that is difficult to find, especially in this draft, with there being a lot of smaller receivers towards the top end of this draft. Eric, we're going to move on to you with the 24th pick here. Another possible opportunity for their first tight end, but Evan Ingram did just resign here. So I'm guessing that's not what you're going to do, even though I want a tight end to go. I'm chomping at the bit here. But go ahead, Eric. Who do you think the Jaguars take with the 24th pick?
All right. So there's some moving pieces here. We can definitely make a case for several players. Okay. I am actually, I think I'm going to make you happy here. I am going to take a tight end for the Jaguars here. And it will be, with apologies to Shane Hallam, who we just had on, it's going to be Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. Now, Trent Baalke said, I believe today, that it looks like they're going to get a long-term deal done with Evan Ingram. He's going to report to voluntary workouts, so it seems like everything is good there. but why not make a strength even stronger? You're going to have Kirk. You're going to have Ridley on the perimeter for the receivers. And now you get Evan Ingram and Dalton Kincaid. I mean, that is a lot of weapons for Trevor Lawrence, a guy who was the first overall pick of the draft. I love this for the Jaguars. I love this for Trevor Lawrence, and I think it opens up a lot of possibilities on their offense.
Absolutely. All right, Britt, let's move to you at pick 25. The New York Giants, a team that we've heard a lot of rumblings about them potentially upgrading their wide receiver room, but there are some other needs on the defensive side of the football. The offensive line's improved, but could still use some help. Where are you going here?
Yeah, I think at this point in the draft, unless they trade up, there's not really another receiver that really warrants a round one capital. So I think that they pass and wait on a mid round. I'm going to go with Nolan Smith still being on the board here. Like, this guy is a freak athlete, and that 4.39 at the combine, like, are you kidding me? This guy is just going to crush on their edge.
Yeah, no, it would be a great fit there. Thibodeau was there last year as well. Got drafted. They got some young studs rushing the passer there in New York. All right, Eric, back to you with Dallas at pick 26. Do we see another tight end here?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think with the loss of Dalton Schultz, it does open up some opportunity here for the Cowboys. I remember I can't remember how many years ago this was, but nobody really thought CeeDee Lamb was going to fall to the Cowboys. I think it was 17, something like that. And Mike McCarthy, I watched him coach in Green Bay. He never looked as happy as he did when they got CeeDee Lamb on the squad. I think that's the way they treat it with Michael Mayer here. Michael Mayer coming off the board to the Cowboys here, a couple of picks after Dalton Kincaid. Dak Prescott's loving it. Jerry Jones is loving it. Mike McCarthy's loving it. I don't think he falls this far, but he did in this exercise. Cowboys are going to be happy with Michael Mayer here, who can do it all at tight end.
Yeah, I think that would be an absolutely fantastic pick. Let's move on to Buffalo, who there's a lot of potential openings for fantasy football positions, but there's also some needs on that defensive side of the football. So you have a lot of options here, Britt. What are you doing?
So I'm actually going to go with a semi-hometown pick here, and
Okay.
I'm going to go with Drew Sanders out of Arkansas.
Nice.
The Bills still technically have Von Miller on their roster, but he's still recovering from that ACL. They lost Tremaine Edmonds, and Sanders is versatile. He can play middle linebacker, outside linebacker. He's got a unique skill set that will really fit in well and plug some of those holes in Buffalo's defense.
Yeah, and that's something that they sorely needed. There were flashes, but a lot of injuries to that defensive unit. So that would be a good player to plug in. Eric, you get pick 28 here. What happens with these Bengals? I know that there's a lot of potential upcoming signings with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. They got to lock up a lot of these guys, but chance to get some fresh blood here at pick 28.
Yeah, I think they would have loved Mayer, right? If he would have
Mhm.
slipped, and maybe if in this exercise, maybe they trade up. It didn't happen. I think they shore up the defense here and they get some more pass rushing. They did so much to protect Joe Burrow last year. Let's get a player on their team that can go after the opposing team's quarterback. I'm going to butcher this name. I'm going to tell you this right now. Northwestern edge defender Adetomiwa Adebawore. That's who I think they go with here. A player that is big. He's strong. He's quick off the edge. He's stiff against the run. I think he helps him quite a bit here on defense. So Adetomiwa Adebawore, my apologies to him and his family for butchering it. That's the best I could do. That's my pick for the Bengals here at 28.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. They've needed some help there. Wouldn't have been surprised to see you go offensive line either, but it was an improved unit from years past. So we will see how things pan out. All right. We are now to pick 29, Britt. You've got the New Orleans Saints. What are you doing with that pick?
Man, as much as I want to get some depth on that offensive line, Miles Murphy is still sitting out there and he's staring me in the face. And the Saints are definitely going to need a better defense than they had last season. I think that this is the best player available situation. And so you've got to go Murphy.
Absolutely. I think that makes a ton of sense. So I think that's the route that they would probably go if he is still there. Eric, you are now at pick 30 with the Eagles. What are you doing here?
Yeah, what am I doing here? So the Philadelphia Eagles, this is so confusing. Okay, so the Philadelphia Eagles went with an edge rusher for their first pick in getting Lucas Van Ness. Let's go with Mozzie Smith. Mozzie Smith, a defensive lineman who I believe was number 12 on Bruce Feldman's freak list this past, upcoming college or the past college season right before it. I think he was number 12. Super athletic, very strong, very fast for his size. I think about the drill that they do at Michigan where they got to jump up those 2 foot and a half stairs. They got to jump up 6 or 7 of them. He did it, I think, 0.6 seconds slower than Aiden Hutchinson. And Mozzie Smith has like 60 more pounds than Aiden Hutchinson. I think this guy is really underrated as far as how athletic he is. I think he's a great football player as well. And what do the Philadelphia Eagles do? They take good football players. All of a sudden, this defense that lost so many starters, you get Van Ness, and now you get Smith. It doesn't look so bad anymore.
Doesn't look too shabby. All right, last pick of the first round, and then we will be taking a quick break. Britt, who are you giving the Super Bowl champs?
So I think I have to go with Will McDonald here. The Chiefs lost Frank Clark. They may lose Carlos Dunlap. Yes, they did bring on Charles Omenihu, but they still need some real depth in that edge rush. And I think that he's the guy to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. Makes a ton of sense. That wraps up our first round. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to lightning round through the second round just to see if we can get through it. Because we don't have a ton of time. But then probably what we'll do, we'll probably call a slight audible. When we bring Rich on, we might just do a straight up rookie mock. You okay with that, Eric? Because we might not have enough landing spots to go 4 to 5 rounds on that. So we might just finish these 2 rounds and look at how beautiful it is and then just start from scratch. You guys cool with that?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, for Britt, Eric, and myself, this has been so much fun. We are going to be back. Don't leave on the commercial break. Don't leave. We'll just be like 3 minutes, and then we'll be right back finishing up the second round here on the Better Sports Network.
Monday Night Rants with Edward Rouse on Better Sports Network.
Do you believe in the Madden curse? Do you think that's a real thing?
I did. Now, I don't think it's as big of a deal anymore, but it was a real thing for a solid 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it was Sean Alexander, LaDainian Tomlinson, Peyton Hillis.
LT was never on the cover. I know that.
Was he not? I thought he was one. Okay, well, you do know all the covers of everything.
Yeah, okay. So if you want, I could do this real quick. So Garrison Hurst is the first official Madden cover athlete, 1999. 2000, I believe they still put John Madden on the cover. And then 2001 is where it all started. So 2001, you have Eddie George. 2002, Dante Culpepper. 2003, Marshall Falk. 04, Michael Vick. 05, Ray Lewis, first defensive player on the cover.
Okay.
06, Donovan McNabb. 07, Sean Alexander.
Okay.
08, Vince Young. 09, Brett Favre.
Okay.
10 is a trick one because it's
no way you know.
And Larry Fitzgerald. 11, Drew Brees. 12, Peyton Hillis. 13, Calvin Johnson, I believe so.
You're right.
14.
No way you know all this.
14, also a trick question. I believe that's the Madden 25 cover, and it's Barry Sanders, unless you got it for the new consoles, in which case Adrian Peterson
oh my God.
was on the cover.
You're not cheating. You're not looking at...
Swear on my life. Swear on my life.
Okay, keep on going.
15, you have Richard Sherman.
Okay.
16, hold on. 16 is Odell Beckham.
Okay.
16. 17, now this is the one I get mixed up because 17 and 18 are back-to-back Patriots.
They are.
17, I think, is Gronk, and 18 is Brady.
You are correct.
19 is Antonio Brown.
Correct.
20, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh my goodness.
21, Lamar Jackson. 22, Brady Mahomes. 23, John Madden. Yeah, dude, I'm a cover nerd when it comes to this stuff.
We now know, but that was really impressive. I don't know how.
Thank you.
That's literally 29 of them or something like that. Wow, that is That is, you did not miss a single one, and you even got the special editions where they had 2 people on the covers.
Monday Night Rants on Better Sports Network.
All right, we are back. This is the FFPC Dynasty Nerds crossover. Eric Balkman, Britt Flinn, myself, we are all here. We just flew through the first round. And I'm not going to lie, I think we crushed it. I think we did a great job. I think many teams would be very happy with us, especially the Raiders getting CJ Stroud at pick 7. I think they're thrilled. But we are going to now do a lightning round of a second round. So I hope you guys have buckled up. Hope you guys are ready, because this is going to be fast and furious. This is going to be Vin Diesel off the cliff, catching a chain to hold onto a plane type of speed here. Okay, so this is what we're doing. You guys are ready?
Let's go.
Britt has her game face on. I don't know if Eric's ready, but
No,
Britt's
I'm
got
not
her game
ready.
face.
I'm not 100% not ready. I'll do my best to keep up.
Okay. All right. Tyler's messaging me. He's like, please have mercy on your producer. He's the poor guy, like trying to find all the players. And here I am saying we're going to like Eminem freestyle spit rap this. But okay. So here's what's going to happen. All right. So I'm going to start with you, Britt. You're going to get the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then we're going to alternate. Eric, you'll get Houston, so on and so forth. We good with that?
Yes.
I'm ready.
Okay, Britt, give us your pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I think for Darnell Wright still being out there, let's go. Sure up
All
that
right.
line.
Darnell Wright. Now, Eric, who are you taking for Houston?
I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to go with another receiver here, guys, to pair with Anthony Richardson. Give me Josh Downs out of North Carolina for Houston.
That would be a very interesting landing spot for him. I like it. Arizona, Britt, who are you taking?
Osiris Torrance. Let's give Kyler Murray some protection. We saw how he struggled last year. Let's get that guard in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Eric, who you taking for the Colts? They got their quarterback earlier. Who they taking here?
Yeah, let's go defense. Another corner off the board. You can never have too many of them. Kansas State's Julius Brents.
Nice. Okay. All right, Britt, back to you. Let's go with the Rams pick here. Who are they taking? And I think this is the first time we've seen them.
Yeah, they're like the missing stepchild in the closet. I think they're going to go with Emmanuel Forbes here. I'm surprised that he hasn't gone yet. I think he's a ball hawk guy, and the Rams getting rid of Ramsey. I mean, they need him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Eric, you got Seattle here at pick 37. Who you taking?
They went Jalen Carter. They went Jordan Addison. Let's give them some protection for Geno Smith. I'm going to go with my hometown Badgers here, a guy who can play up and down the line, and that's Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin. Center, guard, tackle. He'll block wherever you put him.
Love it. We'll give our guy Tyler a second to catch up. Find him.
Sorry, Tyler. We apologize.
There we go. All right, so we're on to the Raiders here. Britt, the Raiders already got CJ Stroud. We're at pick 38. Who are you giving them?
I'm going to go with Anton Harrison here. Shore up that O-line. Jimmy G's kind of a game manager situation in the first place. There's not a lot of experience on that line to begin with, so they need some more depth there.
Absolutely. This looked like a juicy landing spot for a running back, but then Miles Sanders was like, nah, I'm here, folks. So, Eric, who are you taking with the Carolina's 39th overall pick here?
Let's go. Let's give some protection for Carolina in Bryce Young. Get him some help on the offensive line. We'll go with Syracuse tackle Matthew Bergeron and give him to the Carolina Panthers here.
Yeah, obviously that's been one of the worst offensive lines in football for a number of years. They made an all defensive draft a couple years ago. They could definitely use some pieces on offense. Now, Britt, you gave the Saints Miles Murphy, and they thank you for it. Who are you giving them at pick 40?
I think I'm going to give them a little more help on defense and go with Cam Smith, the cornerback out of South Carolina here.
Nice pick. I like it. All right, Eric, back to you. Could we see the second running back off the board here, or what are you thinking?
I'm on Tennessee, right?
Tennessee, pick 41.
Tennessee. Yeah. Let's go.
Obviously, this would be projecting that Derrick Henry would be gone.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Let's go with a small school guy here in Cody, and I'm going to butcher his name here. Is it Moch or Mock from North Dakota State?
I believe that I don't know. That's what I believe.
Well, we'll call him. Britt, do you have any insight on this? Is it Mock?
I think typically the CH followed by or following the vowels is a hard K. So I think it is Mock.
Cody, well, he will go in this mock. We'll take Cody Mock here, and he will go to Tennessee.
There we go. Pick 41 with our boy Cody. We'll make sure that we're able to find it. There he is. All right. Back-to-back picks for the New York Jets. Britt, who you got with the first one?
I think that the Mean Green get a little bit more mean on defense, and I'm going to go with Diane Henley from Washington State, the linebacker.
Nice pick. I like that pick for them. Who are you giving them then, Eric?
I'm sorry, that was Henley. Okay, so let's go with let's get nuts here, as George Costanza would say.
Hey, let's do it.
Go back-to-back defenders. We'll go with edge defender. I think he's still out there. Yeah, I just see him now. BJ Ojulari out of LSU. Let's give him to the New York Jets, continuing the tradition of whoever has Aaron Rodgers on their team not giving him any weapons.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really nice of you. All right, so Bijan Robinson went at pick 8, one of the most exciting running backs we've seen in a long time. Who are the Falcons taking at 44, Britt?
I think I'm going to reach a little bit here and go with Jalen Hyatt. Calvin Ridley got traded to the Jaguars. They've only got Drake London really as the tower, and I think that he's going to function really well in their offense.
I like it. I think that makes a lot of sense. And look, if Desmond Ridder can't make it happen with Drake London, Jalen Hyatt, and Kyle Pitts, like, it's just not meant to be. And Bijan Robinson.
We're giving you all the chances. Come on, Ridder, do your thing.
Come on, man. All right. Pick 45. Eric, it's back to you. It worked out. It was meant to be. Who are you taking?
There's 2 tight ends out here that the Packers have met with. One of them, I think, is a younger version and maybe a rich man's version of Mercedes Lewis, who's basically been functioning as a 6 offensive lineman the last couple of years. I'm going to go with the guy that I think gives them a little bit more juice downfield, a little bit more pass catching acumen here. I'm going to go with tight end Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State. Let's give him to the Packers here at 45.
I like that pick. I could easily see that happening. Let's head over to New England. Britt, who are you giving them?
Yeah, I'm going to beef up their defense a little bit. And Felix Anaduke-Ozoma is still out there from Kansas State. You've got to grab him. It's the classic Bill Belichick mean defense, and this guy would fit in perfectly.
I could not agree more. Eric, you've got Washington here at pick 47. What are the Commanders doing?
Took Broderick Jones in the first round. Let's flip the script. Give him a linebacker on the defensive side of the ball out of Clemson, Trenton Simpson, to give them a little bit of more help on the defense, stopping Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, and all those talented NFC East offenses.
I like it. All right, Detroit for you, Britt. What are you taking here with pick 48?
I'm going to go with the big athletic tight end out of Georgia in Darnell Washington. I know that they've got Brock Wright, and they're pretty much all set on offense, but Washington would really help take their offense to the next level.
Guy like Dan Campbell is going to love that guy. That just makes perfect sense. All right, Eric, Pittsburgh. They've made 2 picks so far, one on the offensive line and one at corner. What are they doing here?
Well, there's another Badger defensive lineman that I would love to give them, but I'm going to stay away from him. I'm going to go down to Texas and take a defensive lineman out of Baylor for Pittsburgh here, Siaki Ika. I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. Let's give him to Pittsburgh to help shore up the run defense and give them another guy that can plug up blockers so those outside linebackers that Pittsburgh is so famous for can get after the quarterback and start making plays.
Absolutely love it. All right, let's head back to Tampa Bay. They took the safety branch out of Alabama with pick 19. Britt, what are you having them do here?
I think you're going to have to go Hendon Hooker. You don't have any safety or depth at quarterback after this season. This year will be the perfect year to sit behind, heal up, learn the system, and then next year be the franchise starter for the Bucks.
All right. Well, we got another team making their first pick here, Eric. Who are you giving to the Miami Dolphins?
All right. So the Dolphins, they love running backs, right? And I'm going to give them another one, even though they already have Raheem Mostert on this squad. They brought back Jeff Wilson as well. Let's get him a super talented pass catcher out of the backfield. Second running back is off the board. He goes to Miami from Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, that would be so exciting. That kind of speed in an outside zone scheme. Give me that all day long. All right, we are back to Seattle, they're making their fourth pick already at pick 52. Pretty impressive. Britt, who you taking there?
Oh, man, it's definitely on offensive line. To me, it's between Steve Avila and Luke Whippler. I think I'm going to have to go Avila. I just like him a little bit better.
I like it. Makes a lot of sense. It's a team that could use some offensive line help. We are now headed back to Chicago. They are now making their second pick at pick 53 after trading their earlier pick for none other than Chase Claypool. So, Eric, who are you taking at pick 53?
I'm going to end the slide of one Keon White, a guy who was invited to the NFL draft to be in the green room for round one. He was not taken in round one in this mock. He finally gets taken at 53. Keon White, the edge rusher out of Georgia Tech, is now a Chicago Bear for this exercise.
Seems like one guy falls into like the 30s or into the second round every year. So it's bound to happen. You always feel bad for those guys. Like, that sucks. But, it does happen. All right, Britt, the Chargers, you broke my heart on their tight end, but, maybe you can fix it here. Who are they taking?
I think you have to go with potentially the best linebacker in this draft, and that's Jack Campbell.
That's a bold claim, but I like it.
Well,
Iowa.
Personally, I think that it's Sanders, but I'm also biased. So
all those Iowa guys do, man. That all they do is they eat corn, they eat beef, and they play football. Jack Campbell's a perfect example out of that. I mean, that defense last year was filthy, and the offense kind of got, was the unit that held them back. I love Jack Campbell. I think he's a tremendous player.
All right, Eric, what are the Detroit Lions doing with their fourth pick at pick 55?
Yeah, I'm not going to wait on my Badger anymore. Keanu Benton, a guy that was like a third, fourth round projection at the start of the 2022 collegiate season. Now he's going to go. He's been rising up draft boards. I think that the Lions get better on defense here on that defensive line. Keanu Benton to the Lions.
There we go. Another defensive line to pair with Aiden Hutchinson. The Jaguars are making their second pick at pick 56. Britt, who you taking?
I think I'm going to get a little protection here for Trevor Lawrence and go with Luke Whippler, the center out of Ohio State.
I think that's a good pick, but let's be real. Anytime you pick a Buckeye, that's always a good pick. All right, pick 57. Do we see the talented corner Ringo finally go, Eric?
Not here, no, but we will see a defensive back go. This is a player that I was hoping that my Packers would maybe sniff him in the third round. He's not going to make it there. Texas A&M safety Antonio Johnson has been moving up the boards. He's a super athletic guy, a guy who has made a lot of plays in the secondary for A&M, and I think a guy that's very projectable to the NFL game as well. Giants are going to love what they get in Antonio Johnson here, the safety from Texas A&M at 57.
Perfect. All right, Britt, who you got here for the Cowboys at pick 58?
I am so excited about this pick, and Zach Charbonnet is still sitting right there on the platter for me. So I am taking the every down bell cow back out of UCLA.
This is turning into probably the consensus RB3 in the class for the most part. I know there are some differences. Mine is slightly different, but I do think that it's a very good pick. He would be a great fit with Tony Pollard there. So pick 59, Buffalo. Eric, who you got?
A player I don't think we've mentioned all night, Garrett, and we'll mention him right now. They obviously like Gabe Davis, but they might love a different guy in his position. I'm going to go with Rashee Rice here as the Bills pick, the wide receiver, a guy who's been getting some love lately. I know he's not the most dynamic guy in the world, but he has shown a penchant for playmaking in his career. I think the Bills can work with him here with Josh Allen. So Rashee Rice to the Bills.
That's an interesting pick. He didn't get a great score for me watching his tape, but I do see the upside, and he tested a lot better, and you see flashes of the athleticism, but he prefers to play as a big physical wide receiver as opposed to a guy that can utilize his speed more. We will see what he does at the next level. Pick 60, Britt, who you got?
I think I have to go with another Ohio State player here, and DeJuan Jones, the tackle.
See, always a good pick. Anytime you pick a Buckeye, always a good pick. Absolutely. All right. We are to the Chicago Bears with pick 61. Eric, who you taking?
Let's go with it's all, we're getting to that point of the draft where I don't know what to do, right? All right, so we'll go with I don't think they've taken a corner yet in this draft. And this will follow this pick will follow my long line of drafting guys I don't know how to pronounce their names. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson out of TCU. Let's give him to the Bears here at 61. They need to improve that defense. They get some help on the perimeter to battle the Amon-Ra St. Browns, the Christian Watsons of the world, the Justin Jeffersons of the world. Let's give him to the Bears here.
Yeah, and he's a corner, correct?
Yes, corner.
And LaDainian Tomlinson's nephew.
Oh, I did not know that, Britt. How about that? And still a TCU guy, runs in the family. How about that?
Yep. Interesting little factoid for everybody.
Yes. There we go. All right, Britt, who you got here at pick 62 to the Eagles?
Oh, man, this is so hard because the Eagles are so complete. Oh,
they are.
Man.
They can really go best player available.
You know, I think that they're going to go ahead and go Nathaniel Dell. They've got
Tank.
I mean, you need a third wide receiver here. I think that this guy's the best on the board because I cannot think of another place that they really have a need. So got to go with him.
Yeah, speedster, small guy, makes big plays. Eric, what are you thinking here with the final pick of the speed second round to the Kansas City Chiefs?
I'm trying to keep up with it. I think I got it. So they went Will McDonald in the first round. Let's make, again, the strength even stronger here. You get Jones on that defensive line. You have Will McDonald there now. And let's give him, again, a guy I'm going to butcher his name, Tuli Tuipulotu from USC. Tuli Tuipulotu, defensive lineman from USC that will help Chris Jones. It will help the Chiefs defense. It will help them in their battles to try to get back to another Super Bowl this year. I love what the Chiefs do here with McDonald and then Tuipulotu. This is a good formula for Kansas City.
All right, and I believe that wraps up the second round because we are a pick short this year due to Miami Dolphins not having the first one in the first round. So pick 63 is actually the last one of the second round. So, Britt, I really appreciate you joining us. I don't think you could have done any better in a situation. Drink some Gatorade, get some electrolytes, recover from this. We really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, I'm sweating over here. That speed round really got me. Thank you guys for having me on. It was a blast.
Thanks,
Britt. It was an absolute joy having you on. Thanks again for coming.
Appreciate it.
All right, we are going to take a quick break. When we do, Rich Dotson of Dynasty Nerds, my good friend and co-host, will be joining us, and we are going to do not a startup. We're not doing a startup. We are doing a rookie mock
Don't throw
draft.
that on me now, Garrett. We can't do a startup draft after we just did the NFL draft. We have to just do a rookie mock. My God, I got palpitations enough already.
After this, Eric's going to message Matt and be like, never again. Never ask to do a show with nerds again. Thank you and goodbye. All right, we will take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes here on the Better Sports Network.
The 5-Pack with Kyle Elfrink, weekdays from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern on Better Sports Network.
Jalen Hurts has got a new contract. It is 5 years, $255 million. Now, if you follow anything in the NFL, you know the argument is always about guaranteed money. That's why Lamar Jackson's holding out. Lamar Jackson's winning like $230 million guaranteed. Jalen Hurts reportedly is getting $180 million guaranteed. Now that sets a new standard. Lamar Jackson says the standard is Deshaun Watson. The rest of the NFL says it's not. Now the standard is $180 million. So I just want Lamar Jackson to hear this. Jalen Hurts today was more than happy to take $180 million guaranteed. Jalen Hurts has probably not accomplished as much as Lamar Jackson, but in a manner of speaking, and this is just my opinion, Jalen Hurts started from a weaker spot than did Lamar Jackson when he came to the NFL. Both guys were seen as a bit of a project. Both guys were seen as more runner than thrower. To me, Lamar Jackson has improved slightly as a thrower, but is still mostly a runner. Jalen Hurts has improved an incredible amount as a thrower, and he's done it in a lot more of a quick time frame than Lamar Jackson. Jalen Hurts has arrived in the NFL as an unfinished product. It's not finished, but the polishing and the improvement has been off the charts. Much better than Lamar Jackson. And Jalen Hurts more than happy to take $180 million guaranteed. Lamar Jackson not. Lamar Jackson's still holding out. Now, those aren't the only two quarterbacks thinking about money today. Kudos to Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson's still pouting. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. I will tell you this. At some point in the next month, I would suggest one, if not both those guys, Burrow and Herbert, will do even better than Jalen Hurts in terms of guaranteed money. Because that's what this is about. It's ego. That's what these guys love. He gets 180, Burrow will go 182, and Herbert will go 185. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson will still be pouting and saying, why am I not getting 230? Maybe he comes to his senses after all this. Who knows? But Eagles get it taken care of. Jalen Hurts signed, sealed, and delivered. A lot of guaranteed money.
Make bets and follow your fantasy team while you buy, sell, and trade collectibles in real time. Only on Better Sports Network.
All right, we are back in Dynasty Nerds, FFPC. We just finished a huge, massive 2-round mock draft in the matter of an hour and like 10 minutes with analysis and everything. Eric, I know you needed that break. I needed that break. How are you feeling now reflecting on it?
It was good. You know, like normally when I do mocks, I'm usually just mocking it for one team. And letting a simulation do the other team. So I'll do 7 rounds, but I don't normally do where we're going, you know, every other, you know, trying to figure out what's going on for these teams. So shout out to not only Tyler Soto for crushing the actual, you know, keeping track of it, which we really appreciate it. But then obviously also Britt Flinn for knowing way more than me on some of these defensive players and offensive linemen, which I really appreciate. And kept it going. She was great. You were great. It was a fun exercise. This is one of those things too. Like when we get to draft season, Garrett, like March and April, like we could easily pound out like 1 or 2 rounds of this. And I don't know how informative it would be, but man, it'd be fun because it was fun.
So much fun. Yeah, she did a fantastic job. You did a fantastic job. Great information, great insight on what the teams needed, what they were looking for. And there were some spicy picks there. But speaking of a spicy pick, we've got Rich Dotson at Rich Dotson on Twitter. Rich, how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going good, boys. How we doing tonight?
We are doing well. We just finished up a 2-round NFL mock draft, full mock. Now, our original hope was to do 3 rounds, and then we would draft the rookies based off the landing spots. We only got through 2. So we're just starting from scratch. We're not doing landing spots. We're just going to do a straight up mock. You all right with that, Rich?
Yeah, I'm down, man. I caught the first round. I was at my son's baseball game earlier. So you guys started a while ago. I caught the first round of your guys' draft there. So it was good stuff.
Awesome. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the board and we're going to go just in order. So basically, we'll have you start off, Rich. Then we'll have Eric go, myself, and we'll just go all the way through the 3 round or the I think we're doing 4 rounds. We'll see what we get to, but we'll make our way through the rounds, pick by pick. Before we do, though, I got to tell everybody, Fantasy Alarm has all of the fantasy football and betting content you need to prepare for the NFL draft and the upcoming season, featuring Britt Flinn, who we just saw, Britt Flynn's mock draft, rookie scouting reports, NFL team needs, player projections, Discord chat, and more. For a limited time, get the complete NFL package plus DFS playbooks for all sports at an additional 20% off the already discounted annual price with promo code NFL Draft at fantasyalarm.com. That's promo code NFL Draft at fantasyalarm.com. All right, so what we're going to do here is a super flex rookie draft. And Rich, you have the 101, probably the easiest pick. But is it still Bijan Robinson for you?
Yeah, it's an easy pick for me here. And I will say this throughout the hype, there is one player I think in this draft that could, as crazy as it sounds, 5 years from now make you go back and go, oh man, I wish I had that player instead of Bijan. I know it's loony as that sounds. Don't call me Bugs Bunny, but it's loony. And I think it's Anthony Richardson from a fantasy football perspective. I think 5 years from now, if it goes the way like you hope it goes, then you go like, oh yeah, Anthony Richardson's nice, but I'd much rather, or Bijan's nice, but I'd much rather have Anthony Richardson because he's outperforming them on a weekly basis. Because that's the key here with Superflex is when it's why we push quarterback so hard because it doesn't matter if you're quarterback 15, you're still a top 25, top 50, top 60 overall fantasy football scorer. Anthony Richardson has the potential to be the number one overall fantasy point leader. So as of today, as it stands, all the rumors, I don't know where Anthony Richardson went in your guys' mock. I can't recall. If he went to the Colts, that's a really good spot for him. But it's still going to be Bijan Robinson because I'm still taking the most special player in this draft, and that's Bijan. We can sit here and talk about him all day, but if you could sit here and close your eyes and say, what do I want my perfect running back to do really well? Well, to go ahead and check that box because that's what Bijan does. He does everything well, whether he's moving outside, whether he's moving inside between the tackles. If you want to run routes, you want to catch the football, there is nothing that he does not do well. A true 3-down running back, which is Dynasty Fantasy Football Gold. Fantasy Football Gold to get that kind of player that can be on the field all 3 downs, catch the passes, get the rushes. Easily has a chance to be the number one overall fantasy football running back, just like we see a lot of these rookies come out and do, like Jonathan Taylor a couple of years ago. In year one, it doesn't matter what team he goes on, he's bulletproof. So right now, I'm going to take the most bulletproof player in this draft, and it's going to be Bijan Robinson.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think most drafts we would see at this point probably agree, but I know that the quarterback is pretty tempting. And just to remind everyone, we are going with a super flex mock draft here. We're also going to use the FFPC scoring, so you get that 1.5 for tight ends as well, so that boosts up some of these other guys. So Eric, you are on the clock at pick 102. You taking a quarterback here, I'm assuming?
I am, and we talked. You asked me this last hour, like who are your top 2 quarterbacks, or who's your number 2 quarterback, and I said I had Bryce Young ahead of Anthony Richardson. Now, Rich, in our draft, Anthony Richardson did slip. I went crazy and I took Will Levis to the Colts at 4 over Anthony Richardson, which may or may not happen. Richardson fell to the Texans, so he goes with their second pick. That's where he went. That is probably going to be the deciding factor. I love Anthony Richardson. I want to swing for the fences in my Dynasty Superflex drafts. However, the fact that he slid a little bit, the fact that Bryce Young is still out there, and he is the first overall pick of the draft to the Carolina Panthers, a team that gave up so much to get him. I think this is another home run type pick here with Bryce Young. So I'm going to take Young at the 102. I would have taken, had I had the 101 pick, I would have taken Bijan Robinson still, even in Superflex. But at the 102, I'm going to go with Bryce Young for the Carolina Panthers here.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And you made my decision really difficult because you guys are hyping up Anthony Richardson, and I believe that he could be that guy. But Rich will tell you, I'm more conservative with my early picks. I don't like to take a lot of chances, and I see the risk, but I also see the reward with Richardson. So as difficult as it is, I think I'm going to go with CJ Stroud. I just think he's a guy that will be a consistent NFL quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. I think he will do enough with his arm, and I think he has enough with his legs where he will be a fringe quarterback one for fantasy. And I just really don't want to lose a first-round pick early. It's the safe pick. It's not the exciting pick. It's not the flashy pick. but I got to go CJ Stroud here at 1-3. So, Rich, I think I put you in a pretty nice spot here at pick 1-4.
Yeah, I'm in a rookie draft here. I'm feeling really giddy about this pick, and I'm really excited because my team's bad enough where I'm at 1-4. I'm not the worst team, but I'm also not a good team. So Anthony Richardson here would be a fantastic pick because you took CJ Stroud, right?
I took CJ Stroud.
Yep.
I think Tyler's going to fix that, but yeah.
Yeah. So to me, it's a home run pick because. And I don't even care where he goes. It's the same thing. If he goes to the Texans, that's fine. That team's doo-doo, which means he's going to run the football a ton. And that's where I'm really going to get my fantasy football production. And if he kind of pans out, or if he has to sit a little bit, like I'd almost at like 1-4 where my team's still kind of at the bottom quarter there, I would prefer him to sit out just a little bit of the year and my team kind of tank, put me in a better position to get Drake May, Caleb Williams the following year, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. So, but again, Anthony Richardson's upside here is just too high not to to swing at that ball, right? Like it's like the bases are loaded, it's the bottom of the ninth, and for sure you're gonna get that fastball, and you're swinging at it as hard as you can because the upside is so high. And here's the thing, it's an insulated pick, definitely in Superflex, because when you get a guy like Anthony Richardson, even after that first year, we have to project that Anthony Richardson is probably going to be a top 10 NFL pick, maybe top 12, right? So that's an insulated pick. Like he's going to get opportunity, and the fact that he can move so well with his legs, he's going to get 2 years. So like after that first year, if you aren't totally bought in, you're still going to be able to recoup that draft capital that you sold, if not even probably plus that you spent on that 1-4. So I love the upside here. I think Anthony Richardson he's inaccurate, but I do like his pocket presence. I love the fact he doesn't take sacks. I like that when he plants his feet, he can be pretty accurate as well. So to me, I think Anthony Richardson is at 1-4 a fantastic pick, because I honestly probably would have taken him at 1-3 over Bryce Young.
All right, there you go. It makes a lot of sense, and that he could end up being the best player in this draft. So always a good opportunity with a guy like that. So, Eric, that means you are up at pick 1-5. Who you going with?
I made my bed, guys. I'm going to sleep in it. Will Levis, in this exercise, went at the 104 to the Indianapolis Colts. If I'm going to take him to the Colts at 104, I am going to select him at the 105 in a super flex draft. I know there's some talented guys out there. I know JSN's out there. Zay Flowers, obviously. You talk about the tight ends, obviously, that went in the first round here too. But if I take Will Levis at 104, I'm obviously believing that he is worth a super flex pick at 105 here. So give me Levis at 105.
Yeah, and I think that makes perfect sense. If he's a top 10 pick, especially at pick 4 to the Colts, I mean, you've got to take him in the top half of the draft. Like you have to. He has to be a top 6 pick. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If a guy gets that type of draft capital, you've got to take him. So I'm up here with pick 6. And there's a lot of options. Hooker has been getting some first-round buzz. You know, he's elevated himself to, if he actually does get taken in the first round, he's within range here. But I mentioned that I like to play it safe, and I don't think there is a more safe player in this class than Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he is as solid as they come. Fantastic route runner, can go up and get the football. We've seen him do it with other talented receivers on his team, and he still is able to put up the numbers. I think he can win outside. I think he can win in the slot. I think he's team proof. I don't think there's a team where it's like, oh no, now I don't want him because he went here. Now, like he could go just about anywhere, and I would be interested. So I got to take Jackson Smith-Njigba at pick 106, which puts you on the clock, Rich, at 107. I know who you're taking too.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows we're taking. So I'd rather, can I just make a statement too? Because I kind of want to go back to Eric's pick and like what you said.
Sure.
Garrett, because I think it's really important for people that play Dynasty Fantasy Football and Superflex. And you hit the nail on the head where if Will Levis gets top 10 draft capital, there's absolutely no way whatsoever you could take Jahmyr Gibbs, Jackson Smith-Njigba, or anybody else over him. You absolutely 100% have to take the quarterback there because that's where the value is. And I see too many leagues and too many people that they're like, well, I don't know. Like, I like Jackson Smith-Njigba better. I don't trust Will Levis. It doesn't even matter if you like Will Levis. If you think he's the worst quarterback in the whole world, if he goes top 10 in the NFL draft in Superflex, you have to take him. I just want to reiterate that because I think it's the biggest mistake people make in Superflex leagues is they pass on those top 10 drafted quarterbacks that offer that insulation. And yes, you might miss. You might get those Zach Wilsons, you might get Baker Mayfield, but you still have to swing for the fence. That's where the value is. So my pick here at 1-7, and this is we're about to see a big tier break here, or not a big tier break. We're about to see a tier break. So to me, it looks like you'd want to have a top 7 pick in your Superflex draft this year because I'm taking Jahmyr Gibbs, running back out of Alabama. Again,
that's not who I thought you were taking, Rich.
Oh, really?
This is a 1.5 tight end premium.
I'm still taking Jahmyr Gibbs.
Okay, all right. I was just checking.
If I have a chance here to get like an Alvin Kamara, right, like a running back that's coming here and catch, if he could just do what he did in college, if he come in here and just catch. I mean, he averaged 3.3 receptions in college. So if he can come in here and catch 4 footballs a game, get that high second-round draft capital, get some yards in between the tackles, definitely if it goes to a place like the Eagles or whatnot, get a PPR monster. These pass catcher running backs trump the solid in between the two tackle running backs, and that's where the value is. It's about like scheme and system fit. And if you're going to draft a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, you're drafting him to fit your system, and you're going to scheme him because he's going to get really good draft capital. And, we say that on our podcast all the time, Garrett. Alvin Kamara has been one of the best running backs this past decade. Is he one of the best running backs in the NFL? Absolutely not. But for fantasy football wise, he's been an all-time Hall of Fame fantasy football running back, and that's the kind of production that Jahmyr Gibbs can give you. Those pass catcher running backs are Dynasty fantasy football gold. Again, he's an upper echelon with his speed. Remember, he ran a 4.36, second fastest combine, 40 at the combine. Very dynamic in the open field, those lateral cuts and quick feet. So Jahmyr Gibbs right here is a fantasy football star, hopefully in the making. I can't wait to get him on my Dynasty teams.
Yeah, and by the way, Rich, you're getting some love here. Dan Edwards said, yeah, I agree with that as well. Not sure if he sees the chat, but Rich is one of my favorite analysts to listen to. The whole Dynasty Nerds crew is awesome. So you're getting some love there, Rich.
Oh, I love you too. Smooches.
All right, Eric, you're up at pick 108.
Yeah, I am actually gonna go with a tight end here, and the question is which one? Because in our exercise, we had Dalton Kincaid going to the Jaguars at, what was that, 24, and then you had Michael Mayer going to the Cowboys at 26. And I think you can make arguments over which one of these players should be going first in drafts. There's a lot to like in Dallas for their offense. There's a lot to like with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Now, I'm going to do what I do in my normal dynasty drafts when I can't make up my mind, guys. I go with what the NFL did. Since Dalton Kincaid went first here and I can't make a strong enough argument for Michael Mayer over him, I'm going to take Dalton Kincaid despite the presence of Evan Engram, despite, that Michael Mayer should step into the starting role in Dallas with no Evan Engram. I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid here as my pick. I think that he is set up. I said this on one of my other shows, like, I'm convinced that this back injury for Kincaid, I think he's over it, but I also think that there's a non-zero chance that this takes a few years off his career, and then you can make the case, well, maybe it should be Mayer. But I'm too in love with Dalton Kincaid right now to take Mayer over Kincaid, so I'm going to go with Kincaid in the tight end premium FFPC Superflex rookie draft here.
I feel like somebody just stole my wife right in front of me.
Rich, I tried to tell you at 1-7, man. I tried to tell you. All right.
I know. So, I can't pass that. I know. I
know. It's tough. It's tough.
I didn't know he went to the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence. Somebody told me that information. He was playing with Trevor Lawrence.
All right.
I will tell you this. If Dalton Kincaid goes to the Chargers, I would have been way more tempted there. Like, I know for a fact that he was on the Chargers, I'd be a little bit more tempted to go there ahead of Gibbs, but I didn't know anything. So, Garrett, you're on the clock.
No, you're good. You're good. And we scrapped that. It's good to talk about and throw out there, but we're not tied to it. So 109, I have a lot of options. Here that are running through my mind. There are players that I specifically love that I don't think would be gone at this point in normal drafts, but I would be hard pressed to miss out on some of those guys. I think that there are some value picks. So, I'm all over the place here with this one. But I think at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the number 2 wide receiver on the board in Zay Flowers, because for me, there's a big drop-off I know other people have Addison above Flowers or Quentin Johnston above Flowers. For me, it's JSN in his own tier, Zay Flowers in his own tier, and then a tier of like 10, 12 receivers. So I like Zay Flowers enough that I would want to make sure that I got a receiver that I liked in this draft. As much as a guy like Michael Mayer or somebody like that might be tempting, I got to go with Zay. So, Rich, you're on the clock here at 110.
Yeah, and that workout with Pat Mahomes is pretty nice, right? There's a lot of rumors coming out now. They're at 31 that they might get a little saucier. So I think I'm gonna kind of shock some people here. And I think this is the way you should go in Superflex, because I have a feeling that this player is going to sneak his way into the back of the first round. I'm going to go Hendon Hooker, quarterback out of Tennessee.
Good pick.
You know, when I say, I think after Zay Flowers, but even Zay Flowers, because of his height, he's got to kind of be the outlier out there, right? Being at 5'9". This draft class where there's a ton of talent, it starts to get real risky, right? Like any one of these players can bust. Any of one of these players could be solid. Any of these players could just be a jag or really good. Like it wouldn't shock me for this next tier players, probably like 8 to 9 of them. So if I'm going to take a risk in a super flex league, I'm taking a risk on the quarterback. And Hendon Hooker, you know, where he's kind of a safe play. Like if W gets that back end first round capital, even at high second round, like that Derek Carr, Drew Brees draft capital, this is a player that went to 2 different schools that came in and set their record for passes without throwing an interception. He's accurate. He's smart. He's a little older coming to the league, so 25, but that's fine in quarterbacks. Like if you can give me 8-9 years at the quarterback position, I'm going to be pretty happy. I think Seattle will be a pretty good spot for Hendon Hooker there, sitting behind Geno Smith for a couple of years, and I'm okay with that. You know, like I'm okay with sitting on a quarterback, and definitely back here, right? Like if you're picking at 111 and this is your real pick, how many opportunities do you get a young quarterback? Like how many opportunities are there for you to get that young quarterback? So, and if he hits, this is a perfect position for a team that's at the back end of their first, because if he does hit, this puts you in position to go out and trade and fill a need that can help excel, elongate your dynasty reign into the playoffs, right? Like it's why you take the best player available. And sometimes the best player available, you got to know your scoring format. So if it's tight end premium, tight ends here. You know, if it's quarterback super flex and there's a quarterback that went real high in the second or the back end of the first, that's where the real value is. So I think Hendon Hooker is my pick here, and I just hope it all works out.
All right. So number one, I love what Rich is saying here about Hooker. I think that, you know, oftentimes we see as we get closer to the draft, it's what do they always say? It's lying season, right? And a lot of the stuff you hear isn't necessarily true. But this Hooker stuff has been going on for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, where not only could he be a high second round pick, he could be a late first round pick, which in my mind, guys, I'm like, well, what if this dude wasn't 25? What if this dude wasn't coming off a torn ACL? Then how high would he be going? I don't necessarily care about a 25-year-old quarterback for dynasty fantasy football, because I think he could put up big numbers again into his 30s if he hits. And if he hits, he makes a lot of sense here where Rich takes him, and maybe even a little bit higher in a super flex draft. So I think that's a solid pick. Now, in our exercise tonight, as our wonderful producer Tyler Soto is pointing out, he went to Tampa Bay in the second round in this draft. And I love that spot for Hendon Hooker going forward, because he's going to have, if he sits out this year, I mean, to me, Kyle Trask isn't a threat. If he starts next year and he's ready to go, he's going to have the opportunity to be throwing to Evans and Chris Godwin, who I like, and Cade Otton, who really came on at the end of this past season. He's going to have a pass-catching running back in Rachaad White, not to mention who else they get in the draft this year and next year, plus free agency. There's a lot to like about Hendon Hooker going to Tampa. There's a lot to like about Hendon Hooker going to Rich here at the spot that he just took him.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick as well. And that puts you on the clock here at 111. So who are you taking? You mentioned a tight end you thought about at 8, and he's still there.
All right. I'm going to wear the FFPC badge on my sleeve for this one. Tight end premium. He's still out there. I considered him with my last pick. I'm not going to let him slip any further. Listen, CeeDee Lamb's going to be a target monster in Dallas for the foreseeable future. After that, I don't know. I don't know if Brandon Cooks is there long-term. I don't know if Michael Gallup's ever going to be the guy that they drafted him to be. I do know, and what we heard from Shane Hallam in how hour number 2 tonight about how good this guy is at all the aspects of the tight end game, not just what we care about for fantasy, but the other stuff for as well, as far as blocking and everything like that. He's going to be out on the field a lot. He went to Dallas in this exercise. I think it's a good spot for him. I think he's set up for fantasy goodness there. And in a tight end premium, super flex, rookie draft like we're doing here, Michael Mayer's the pick for me here.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I was hoping you would not do that, but I knew you would since you just talked about him the pick before. So all that being said, this does feel like it's not actually a teardrop for me because I have players here that I like, but they're not players that other people would like at this spot. So now is kind of the game that you play in your own drafts where, okay, I like a guy more than other people. How long am I willing to wait to grab him? Because if I don't want to wait too long and miss out, but I also don't want to overdraft some of these guys. So that's kind of like an internal battle you have in your head sometimes. So I'll play it a little bit fast and loose. This is not my running back 3. But I don't think this guy would come back to me at this point. So I'm going to take Zach Charbonnet. I think he's the safest running back in this class. I think he could project as a 3-down back, which many guys, we can't do that. I think he has the best shot at getting second-round draft capital after Gibbs. So I think Zach Charbonnet makes a lot of sense here, taking him at the end of the first round. And there are other players that I do like more, but I don't think he would get back. So I'm taking Zach Charbonnet here.
Wait, there's another player you like somebody more, but you're taking a guy you like less. I don't
Look,
get it.
I'm playing the game here, thinking I can still get that guy in a few picks.
All right, so let me say this real quick, and this might play into my next pick after Rich takes his guy. I was talking with Jordan McNamara from Football Guys on this show a couple of weeks ago, and he told me, he's like, look, as far as, and this is more, I guess this is more receiver. This is more pertaining to receiver than anything else. But he said, like, look, man, we can't project receivers better than the NFL historically. If you look at fantasy ADP as opposed to where the NFL took these receivers. And he said, if you want to go get your guy, it may be a mistake. You're almost better off going in the order the NFL takes them. Now, as far as Garrett's pick, I don't know what weighed into that at this point. But there have been times in my dynasty drafts where I will have a feeling about a certain player and I like a certain player better, but I'll actually go with the perfect example. And this hasn't worked out for me, but like second round, third round, last couple of years, Tutu Atwell and Anthony Schwartz from Cleveland and Los Angeles. Those players never developed. And Kadarius Toney is another good example too of a player that just kept falling and falling and falling. And people are taking all these players after him. And I was just like, I'm going to stop the slide here. I don't know if these guys are going to work out, but I'm going to at least give the respect of Schwartz being a third round pick, of Tutu Atwell being a second round pick, of Kadarius Toney being a first round pick. So there's something, to me, there's something to be said for, even if I like other players better, and if it's a marginal, I mean, if it's a massive call, you're going to take the player that you like better if it's a deep yawning chasm. But if it's close between picks, I oftentimes will go with the player who was drafted first in the NFL draft, as opposed to the player I like a little bit better if it's close.
I tell those NFL GMs to suck it. And look at my look at my history of ranking these players over years. Maybe you should offer me a job out there, Roger Goodell. Because I mean, when I see Tutu Atwell go to the Rams in the second round, I giggle inside. When I see Anthony Schwartz go in the third round, I'm like, yeah, good luck with those small hands. Even with like David Bell in the third round, I'm like, oh, I don't love that pick.
That was one I avoided that landmine last year. I'm proud to say I avoided David Bell last year.
Yeah, John Ross goes top 10. You're like, oh yeah, all right, buddies. Yeah, good luck with those. So it's like, I get what you're saying, and I'm sure like if you take the percentages, it's probably more along those lines. But like, I try to listen. If I'm going to sit here and talk to tens and thousands of people on a podcast and give them my opinion of what I believe, like I got to stick to it. That's now at the same time, as I circle back, what I say, this draft class will be like, out of all the classes I've ever studied, this draft class of all of them will be more defined by the NFL draft. And I think it's more of a statement on this class than it is the way I play, because like these guys are so close. And this receiver class has got so many holes in it, and it's so risky. Because I think from here on out, like I think this is where you should see the tight end run, and I think you should see the running back run, because those quarterback, like those receivers, like what's the difference between like, now obviously there's a difference, and draft capital is going to change that for me, but like obviously there's Jordan Addison, who I like, but then like the Cedric Tillmans, the Marvin Mims, the Quentin Johnsons, like where's that tier? Where the running backs, I feel a little bit differently about the running backs. I think we can see a lot of these running backs go day 2 and day 3, and then that's going to hold really good value for those guys. So if I was in a class for these next couple of picks, like Garrett took Zach Charbonnet, I'm going running back too. And I know who Garrett's guy is, which is I'm kind of shocked he didn't take his guy. And I'm honestly, I'm torn between 2 running backs, and I would probably take the guy here who has the highest draft capital. I would do that. But since I don't know that, I'm going to give the slight, like literally an ant's hair edge to Devon Achane, running back out of Texas A&M, because I really like his playing style. I mean, his biggest, con is that he's 5'8.5", but like when you watch his tape, he runs stronger than 5'8.5" in between the tackles. This is somebody, when he ran in between the tackles, he still averaged 4.5 yards, in between the yards, between the tackles. And 25% of the time, he was still getting those first downs. And I know it ran the outside about 65% of the time, but he was still able to get it done in between the tackles at the time.
And that was 4.5 yards after contact even, right, Rich?
After contact, yes. 4 yards after contact, which is pretty impressive, because he's super fast. He's dynamic. He's really good with the ball in his hands. He's safe with the ball in his hands. He's only got 2 fumbles in the past 3 years. His burst is great. He's so shifty. He moves laterally well. So this is somebody that I think is going to get a day 2 draft capital, which means he's going to get opportunity in the NFL. And this is a player that I do. And like all running backs, like I just want you to put the ball in their hands, whether you're throwing it to them or hand off to them, just get the ball in their hands, because that equals fantasy football production. And there's only 32 teams out there that have these running backs. So the options are limited in Dynasty fantasy football. So I think the NFL draft's going to really kind of like tighten up my rankings here afterwards, because I think we're going to see a decent amount go day 2. And right now, I would give the slight edge to Devon Achane. And I would even give him the slight edge over Zach Charbonnet, because even where Zach Charbonnet is really safe, I think Devon Achane's ceiling's a little bit higher. So that's where I would go.
No, I think that's a good pick. All right, so real quick, we made it through the first round and the first pick of the second round. We're going to speed things up a little bit because we've only got about 12 minutes left. And I was hoping to at least get to 3 rounds, which has been my entire show, where my goals are loftier than reality. So,
dude, you can't bring me on here and not expect to like jibber jabber nonstop and run my mouth. It's just impossible for me to do. You can't put a microphone in front of my mouth and expect me not to give my opinion. No, I gotta bite my tongue just every time you guys pick, so I can't give my opinion on it.
Oh, this is every Tuesday night, Eric. This is every Tuesday night.
I love it. I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. This is fantastic.
All right, Eric, who you got at 2-2?
There's 2 first-round receivers out there yet. I have more questions on Quentin Johnston than I do Jordan Addison, even though I don't love Jordan Addison here. In our exercise, he goes to Seattle here, and he'll be the number 3 receiver in waiting until Tyler Lockett ultimately parts ways. You'd like to think that Geno Smith is going to be there, or perhaps a young quarterback for Seattle next year. What he did at such a young age in college at Pittsburgh is something that we need to be paying attention to. I'm going to swing. I think he's more of a home run pick than Quentin Johnston here. So give me Jordan Addison, the first pick of the second round, or the second pick of the second pick of the second round. Beg your pardon.
It's been 4 hours, man. It's tough at this point.
Yeah, I know. I'm losing it.
All right. So with the second pick in the second round, Jordan Addison goes at pick 2-3. I feel very fortunate that Tyjae Spears is still here. I was a little worried that Rich was going to take him. He's actually battling with Gibbs as the RB2 in this class for me. I loved everything I saw on tape from him. I think elite elusiveness, the ability to make guys miss in the open field. Tyjae Spears, running back out of Tulane, played his best when it counted most, and I love seeing that out of running back. So I'll take Spears there at 2-3. Rich, you're up at 2-4.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Luke Musgrave, tight end. Tight end premium. This is going to be my bread and butter spot right here because again, these receivers. Once Eric took Jordan Addison, I was like, okay, that's it. All these receivers, doesn't matter if you give me Quentin Johnson, Jonathan Mingo, Marvin Mims, Cedric Tillman here. Like, I'll take any of those guys, and I feel like their upside is just the same. So this is where I'm going to gobble up the tight ends. I think Luke Musgrave is a real smooth tight end who's had that injury bug, and I think he has a good chance to be a very solid fantasy football producer. And, by 2025, he just turned 23. He's not the youngest guy ever, but he's his film speaks for itself. So Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, great pick. That was somebody that I was considering with my next pick. Eric, who are you taking at pick 2-5?
I was considering him with my last selection. I'm going to take Quentin Johnston here. He went to Minnesota in our draft tonight. This is a situation where he steps in to be potentially the future 2 next to Justin Jefferson. I know KJ Osborne will have something to say about that. Still have TJ Hawkinson on this team. But Johnston, the fact that he does represent a receiver that has certain traits that you just can't coach. And the fact that Minnesota invested draft capital into him in round 1, I'll go with him to get him at the 205. I'm pleased as punch at that spot for him. And I'll take my chances with that selection.
Yeah, I can't blame you. There are definitely some concerns, but when you get to pick 2-5, a guy that, has a decent shot to be a first-round pick, he did go in the first round in our mock. That's a great value, and he has some things that some of these other guys don't have, which is the size that you really like to see out of a receiver. So I can't blame you there one bit. Pick 2-6, I am going to go – I've been on a little bit of a running back run, and I'm going to keep up with it, I think. I'm going to go with Tank Bigsby. This is another guy that I really liked in this class. Straight downhill runner. His offensive line was putrid. Of all of the guys that are likely to go in the top, 4 or 5 rounds in the NFL draft, his was the worst according to PFF by a good margin. So he did not have a lot of help, but I think there's a lot of traits that you can look at and say, hey, this guy can do it at the next level. And I think he's a really talented player. So I'm going to take him at pick 2-6. Rich, you got it 2-7.
Can I ask I'm going to use it as reference for me here, where Darnell Washington won your guys' mock draft?
That's a good question, Rich. I want to say, didn't he go? He went in the second round. I know that for sure.
To the Lions.
Lions. There you go.
Oh, yeah, all day. I love what they're doing out there in Detroit. I love what they're doing in that offense. Darnell Washington would be an easy pick for me here if he went in the second round to the Lions that are hungry for big-time playmakers, and definitely over the middle after losing TJ Hawkinson or in the end zone. And I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love DeAndre Swift, and I love Jameson Williams. But Darnell Washington, it's kind of like the Anthony Richardson, right, of the tight ends, where we just don't know what we're going to get. It's just a 1 year. He's a giant freak. Not a ton of production as we know. That 20-yard shuttle he had at the combine. I mean, his combine was just disgusting. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he's kind of somewhat similar to Jelani Woods, but I mean, I hate some of these tight ends are 6'7". It's hard for those guys to produce at the NFL. Like, we don't see a lot of those guys like those Leonard Popes and whatnot that come in and produce at our size. But going off his combine and in the limited production I was able to watch of him at Georgia, this is something that could be a nice red zone threat that could kind of just definitely in a place like Detroit. Like, I could see him climbing up that fantasy football tight end overall finish just on his red zone ability alone. And we all know in football touchdowns are king. And if he gets that, and he's the kind of player that can kind of hit that double-digit touchdown mark because of his hands, his athletic profile, and how quick he can get off the line. So for me, this is something that can give me very solid production with with the upside of double-digit touchdowns. So I'm going to take Darnell Washington, tight end.
Makes perfect sense. The guy's a freak. I like that pick a lot. Eric, you're up, my man.
This is a player that we did not select in our mock draft tonight, but I'm going to go with Kendre Miller out of TCU. Back-to-back TCU picks. Go Horned Frogs. The thing with Miller is I don't think he's necessarily all that special of a player. I also don't think he's all that much of a train wreck of a player. In other words, if he does get the opportunity, which I think is the biggest thing for running backs in fantasy football, I think he is a player that will take advantage of it. I don't think he necessarily does anything really poor. His size maybe is not ideal, but I think he's the type of guy that's an injury away. Maybe he turns into something. This is what we're doing here at the 208 of the draft. I'll take Kendre Miller here.
I like it. All right, at 2-9, I'm going to take my first tight end. I'm going to go with Tucker Kraft, a guy that we touched on a little bit earlier. Sam did a great job of talking about him, or Shane, not Sam. Shane. It's been 4 hours.
Sam did too. Sam was fantastic when he was talking about him. Sam and Shane
absolutely
love Tucker
all the
Kraft.
people.
Everyone loves Tucker Kraft.
Oh man. So you get that big physical presence at tight end. I think he's going to get decent draft capital, and I think that he could be in the profile of some of these elite guys that we've seen before. So I think at 2-9, that's the range. I love getting those type of guys that, maybe there's a little bit of a projection there, but the upside is just huge. So that's who I'm going to take at 2-9. Rich, you're up with your last pick, my man.
Oh, it's my last pick?
This is your last pick. Looking at the time.
2 rounds. Okay.
We wanted to go 3, but my goals were too lofty.
They usually are.
They usually are.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough. Man, there's do I go Sam Laporta, who's so dynamic with the ball in his hands, a little bit smaller to tight end scale, he's only 6'3", or do I go the big receiver? And the only thing here about the big receiver is I don't know which one I really want to take. Do I want Jonathan Mingo? Do I want Marvin Mims? Or I want Cedric Tillman? And I think I would lean Cedric Tillman as it is today. Kind of go back to Eric's take, from Jordan's take, is I would let draft capital decide my overall ranking of these guys between Tillman, Mims, Mingo, here of these big receivers. And listen, this is a draft class full of smaller guys. And Josh Downs didn't go yet either, though, huh?
He's available. He went to Houston in the early second tonight, Rich, for us.
Man, do I gamble on the 5'9" receiver that those guys never put up? I mean, he's pretty dynamic himself. I'll just go ahead and take Josh Downs. I know if you wrote down Cedric Tillman, I apologize. I thought Josh Downs was off the board there. Again, a receiver that's a little bit smaller, got to be a slot guy. But if somebody's going to win the PPR world, I mean, Josh Downs has a skill set. He's real smooth, real savvy. Back-to-back years of really solid production. I usually like to go into big receiver here. And again, I would if one of these 3 big guys goes ahead of Downs, I'm taking that guy there. But I'm assume Josh Downs and go a little bit higher. I know Matt, our partner, said he could see him going in the 4th round, and Garret and I believe he's a day 2 pick. So we'll see how it goes. I'm totally with Eric and Jordan here. Where I'm letting the draft capital kind of sort the rest of my receiver board out here, because the tier's so close. But as of right now, I'm going to take Josh Downs out of North Carolina.
All right, Eric, that means you get your last pick here at pick 211.
Cedric Tillman is flipping off his Dynasty Rich hat, and he is putting on his Eric Balkman hat. I'm going to take Cedric Tillman at 211. I'm not drinking the Jalen Hyatt Kool-Aid, at least just yet. So give me Tillman as my Tennessee receiver pick du jour here.
Yeah, good pick. And it made my selection real easy because I was deciding between Cedric Tillman and Jonathan Mingo. So that means I get to take Jonathan Mingo here with pick 212. I think there's a lot of traits that project well to the next level. So it's been 4 hours. Eric, we did it. Fantastic show. Rich, thank you so much for joining us here for the last part. Rich, real quick, remind everyone where they can find you and anything you want to say about the nerds.
Yeah, on Twitter at Dynasty Rich. Check out Dynasty Nerds. We got a pretty sweet podcast, in my opinion, but I'm very, very biased. And we got a website with tons of Dynasty tools to help you, dominate the game. That's what we're here, just to help you be a little bit better every time you come to the site. And that's the goal of playing Dynasty, just to get a little bit better. Whether you're watching film, whether you're listening to podcasts, it's just grabbing little pieces of knowledge and using that to your benefit. Whether it be good, whether it turns out where it's bad information, like how did that become bad, or whether it's good. It's all a process. So at Dynasty Rich on Twitter and dynastynerds.com.
Eric, anything you want to say before we close out, my man?
Go to myffpc.com. You can adopt Dynasty Orphans. You got plenty of high-stakes tournaments going on there. We are off next week. The FFPC is. I will be back on May 4th with Pat Fitzmaurice from Fantasy Pros will be my guest co-host. Thank you so much to you, Garrett. You were awesome tonight.
It was a blast, man. I really enjoyed doing this with you. We will do it again sometime. I genuinely enjoyed our time. Thank you to all of our guests that we had on. I know it was a lot. We threw a lot at them, and they all handled it like true professionals. So we appreciate it. We'll see you guys back here in 2 weeks on the Better Sports Network.